After endless rewrites, redrafts, selection changes, and more mental torture than a Scott Steiner maths promo, here it is, my friends. The 100 greatest WWE matches of all time. Now yes, your own choices may differ, and the actual numbered rankings will definitely change to suit individuals. But there is a lot to enjoy here, no matter what style you're into. So without further ado, I am Gareth, you are watching WhatCulture Wrestling, and I will later be joined by many more lovely WhatCulture Wrestling faces. And this right here are the 100 greatest WWE matches of all time. 100. Bret and Owen Hart versus the Steiner Brothers, WrestleFest 1994. Now this might seem like a bit of a strange starting point, but have you seen just how great Bret and Owen Hart were as a fleeting tag team back in 1994? They worked a higher profile pay-per-view match versus the Quebecers at the 94 Royal Rumble, but that paled in comparison to a bout taped less than a few weeks before that one. Bret and Owen matched up against Rick and Scott Steiner at the 11th of January Wrestling Challenge tapings. And well, it was a thing of beauty. The WWF included this match on their WrestleFest 1994 VHS release, so it has been immortalized. And good thing they did too, because simply seeing an in-his-prime Bret mix it with a still athletic Scott Steiner was bloody awesome. Typically, for four guys like this, they refuse to phone it in. The pace picked up once Owen entered. Injecting energy into matches was one of his biggest strengths, of course. And then the quartet were off to the races after that. One of the biggest compliments you could give this match is that everybody looked like they wanted to win the thing. There were never any moves for the sake of just doing moves, or dizzying amounts of spots just because they wanted to get their stuff in. No, this was a Bret Hart match, and he favoured psychology and storytelling over ripping it with no rhyme or reason. Bret and Owen memorably split when the latter kicked the former's leg out of his leg at the Rumble. Yeah, remember that? But had that not happened, then there's a real chance that the WWF might have plonked this on a bigger platform come the spring or summer. We got robbed of that, people. Robbed! Number 99, Bad Bunny vs. Damian Priest, Backlash 2023. It's difficult to overcome anybody who just looks at this entry and immediately thinks, Bad Bunny? What? Yes, it once seemed impossible that the rapper would ever be on any best of WWE list, let alone one analysing the absolute best matches in company history. But then Backlash 2023 rolled along, and what happened next was a wonderful treat of celeb-infused goodness that caught everyone by surprise. Now yes, the fired-up crowd in San Juan, Puerto Rico treated every WWE worker from top to bottom like a star, but they kept some powder dry for the main event. Okay, yes, so Bunny versus Damian Priest wasn't actually the headliner, but it was definitely the main attraction for many locally. Seeing local boy done good Bunny out there with a rising star like Priest was emotionally satisfying to the Puerto Rican masses, despite the fact that Cody Rhodes versus Brock Lesnar technically went on last. Not many were talking about Cody or Brock once the PLE was over with though. Nope, they were far too busy waxing lyrical about just how impressive Bunny's performance had been. He lit the venue up with a sensational celebrity routine that Logan Paul would have been proud of. And Priest more than met him halfway by making sure that neither man missed a beat. Bunny scoring the win proved popular, and this remains the musician's last WWE match at time of recording. But that will surely change if he ever gets the urge again, right? Triple H would not say no to more, put it that way. That's just how good the rapper's work was in May 2023. And the bout also played a huge part in convincing management that Damian Priest was worthy of even bigger moments in the years to follow. He did good here, and he proved that he could be a top player. And also that Bunny entrance, oh my god. Now what's your favourite celeb match in WWE history? Is it the Bad Bunny vs. Damian Priest one, or is it something else? You let me know in the comments right down below. Number 98, DIY vs. The Revival, NXT TakeOver Toronto 2016. It is tough to beat classic tag team wrestling that honours traditions while simultaneously serving a more modern audience. AEW's FTR have always understood this assignment, whether they've been producing bangers for Tony Khan's company or working under WWE's umbrella as The Revival. Similarly, DIY duo Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano love getting the chance to spread their wings in-ring and work lengthier matches too. WWE gave both squads the chance to do exactly that at NXT TakeOver Toronto in 2016. Then third brand boss Triple H booked a 2 out of 3 falls scrap for the NXT tag titles. And that turned out to be an inspired call by the game. Challengers DIY were right up against it after dropping the first fall to Scott Dawson and Dash Wilder. But then they roared back into contention by evening the score, before then taking the decisive third to take home the belts. Toronto loved every single minute of this, and rightly so. It was a love letter to classic NWA tags of the past, but also had more than a splash of high-energy action that people who like groups like ROH or New Japan had come to expect. You'd honestly struggle to find a better tag team match on NXT ever, and that is just how good this 2-on-2 was from mechanical start to glorious finish. No, Bobby Roode was not involved, it was just good. Number 97, Dean Malenko vs. Scotty 2 Hotty, Backlash 2000. Some of the most unassuming matches turn out to be cherished undercard gems. This delightful little showdown for the old WWF Light Heavyweight title left many stunned with its quality. However, anyone who had watched Dean Malenko's body of work in WCW could have told you exactly what he was capable of. Toss in deceptive workhorse Scotty 2 Hotty and you had a recipe for cruiserweight fun that few had circled as must-see going into the pay-per-view. In fact, let's be honest about something straight away. This might well have been one of several matches on the Backlash undercard that most fans figured would act as the ideal excuse for a bathroom break. We've all done it. Instead, people were glued to the ring as Malenko and Scotty put together something that the entire light heavyweight division could be proud of. Dean knew how to do that after years of turning heads on Nitro. Also, an awful lot of folks seem to forget that Scotty had cut his teeth as a solid worker long before he was spiking his hair, dancing, and tearing it up as part of the ridiculously over too cool. When asked to go, he could go, folks. The result was an essential match that earned rave reviews for both men. No, this didn't lead to anything bigger for the light heavyweight title or Malenko as ringleader, but at least he and Scotty can look back on the time that they held their own on a jam-packed card that was stacked with top names like Chris Jericho, Kurt Angle, Triple H, The Rock, and even Steve Austin's pay-per-view comeback. Not too shabby. Number 96, Sami Zayn vs. Cesaro, NXT 2013. There was a magic to these old TakeOver events that made them really unique, and that was true of the wider NXT brand as a whole. But it is easy to forget just how special the show's formative years were after breaking free from the original faux reality show vision that Vince McMahon had. By 2013, NXT had snagged a spot as WWE's very own ROH meets New Japan playground. Come August that year, Triple H put main roster star Antonio Cesaro in the ring with ex-El Generico hopeful Sami Zayn, and sparks started flying straight away during the pair's 2 out of 3 falls wonder. A quick fall gave Sami the surprise initiative, and that only made it sweeter when Cesaro began showcasing why he was someone so many fans felt was dreadfully overlooked on WWE's main roster. I mean, technically, few could come close to touching what Cesaro could do bell to bell, and he must have been a dream for someone like Zayn to work with back then, especially when Sami was doing everything in his power to impress upper management and find his way to Raw or SmackDown full-time. One can glean a lot of happiness from watching the earliest knockings of Zayn in WWE's system. He was arguably never supposed to become the big success that he did a decade or so later, but matches like this epic versus Cesaro show that he had the tools all along. Go and watch this one again if you haven't since it happened. You are in for a treat, my friend. Also, if you haven't already, hit subscribe for more WhatCulture Wrestling videos just like the one you are watching right now. Number 95, Bayley vs. Io Sky at WrestleMania 40. The story going into WrestleMania 40 had Damage Control, a faction that Bayley herself had started, falling to pieces. Members like Io Sky and Dakota Kai led a rebellion against Bayley's leadership that eventually peaked when the matriarch was booted out of her own nest. Rude. That led to Mania and Bayley's quest to take the women's title from her old pal Io. WWE agents got every single story beat bang on when building to the blow-off. Then in Philadelphia, Sky and Bayley used the 14 minutes of ring time handed to them wisely. They did not disappoint. Not even close. Both hinged the bout's story on Bayley gritting her teeth and fighting through the pain. Physically, she was battling niggling injuries. And then there was the mental strain of watching her own creation mutiny against her. It was a solid piece of business, one which convinced Triple H that deposed champ Sky could be useful as champion again later on. Inarguably, the follow-up on Bayley's big babyface moment sagged. Her title reign just could not match her title win. But she'll always look back on Mania 40 with a beaming smile. Io will too, because she proved that she was more than just a dazzling high flyer with pretty moves. Sky showed that she could tell stories, and bloody good ones at that. This will never outright win Best WWE Women's Match Ever awards, but it deserves acclaim for blowing off an excellent storyline and launching Bayley back to the very top of the division. There was a lot to like in Philly as WWE's fave girl next door Baby returned to her old NXT form on the grandest stage. Number 94, Eddie Guerrero vs. Edge, SmackDown 2002. A challenge was laid at the feet of both Eddie Guerrero and Edge before shooting their match for the 26th of September 2002 edition of SmackDown. The gauntlet? Go out there and improve on your work together at Unforgiven. Technically, Eddie and Edge filmed this sequel 48 hours after the pay-per-view, but it didn't air until a few days later on TV. Oh, also, they smashed their goal. The no DQ follow-up from Unforgiven was way better than the pay-per-view encounter had been. In truth, that flattered to deceive, and it struggled to properly get going, really. There were no such problems in San Diego for SmackDown, though. Guerrero and the future Rated R superstar were clearly on a mission to exorcise the mini-demons that had plagued them in LA. Not even the usual commercial breaks sandwiched in between segments for regular television could derail what this determined duo had planned. They were raring to knock it out of the park, and they'd even introduced ladders so the finish was as exciting as possible. Now, it's a lot harder than it used to be thanks to the WWE Network's demise, but give this one a look in if you can find it. The stunning execution finish from atop a ladder must be seen to be believed. Eddie Guerrero had nuts made of solid steel to even agree to that thing. And it had to be a painful landing for Edge as well. Hell, fans applauded Guerrero post-match, even though he was the clear heel here. That really says it all. What a match. Number 93, Christian vs. Randy Orton, SummerSlam 2011. Emotions were running high when Christian replaced his retired friend Edge and beat Alberto Del Rio to become the World Heavyweight Champion at Extreme Rules 2011. Back then, Christian was a beloved babyface who stood up for his pal's legacy by putting the vile Del Rio in his place. Things change very quickly in pro wrestling though, and by summer, Christian was a heel himself. Life comes at you fast. Desperation started to kick in for him when going up against longtime WWE pet project Randy Orton. That led to low blows, treachery, and Christian playing the cowardly villain, and he was awesome at it. And the pair had lots of chemistry during their matches. Proof came when they locked horns in a no-holds-barred bout at SummerSlam 2011. What a damn show Christian and Randy put on here. They went over 23 minutes and even gave CM Punk versus John Cena a tough task considering it was next on the lineup. That was a rematch from the historic Money in the Bank pay-per-view too. People were still talking about Orton versus Christian long after Del Rio had cashed in Money in the Bank following that Punk versus Cena main event. Few mastered the art of playing a tyrant with his tail between his legs like Christian. He's brought that to AEW in more recent years via his patriarchy gimmick, of course. It is incredible to think that Vince McMahon was never truly sold on him as a top liner worthy of holding bigger titles for too long. The Vipers surely disagreed with that sentiment after sharing the ring with Christian as many times as he did. The guy was and is amazing. Number 92, Bret Hart vs. 1-2-3 Kid, Raw 1994. 3 dates must stick out to Sean Waltman when he looks at his first full year on the WWF's roster. The 17th of May 1993 saw him shockingly beat Razor Ramon on Raw. Then the 1-2-3 Kid made his pay-per-view debut on the 30th of August 93 at SummerSlam. He was a regular workhorse on the house show loops throughout the rest of the year, but Kid did pop up on TV enough to score an unlikely and short tag title run alongside Marty Jannetty in early 1994. The 11th of July 1994 is a show that Waltman will never forget too. There, his WWF title crack versus Bret Hart aired on the A Show. It had been taped on the 1st of July, but the Kid and Bret must have been aware that they'd torn the house down together. This, at the time, was arguably the best WWF title match that had ever aired on free television. The bout was a credit to the still relatively new Federation flagship Monday Night Raw. Kid should have been very proud of his efforts against one of the top workers in the business. Hart was always the kind of main eventer who prioritized having a great match over making himself look good. Therefore, he was the perfect champion to shine 1-2-3 Kid up some more, and prove why this scrawny underdog was so popular behind the scenes. Kid could get a good match out of everybody even then, but working with the tippy-top stars was a luxury spot to be in for someone so fresh-faced. So many matches on early editions of Raw proved functional, but this right here was a rare exception. The outright best from Raw's first few years? Not quite, but pretty darn close. Number 91, Chris Jericho and Chris Benoit versus Steve Austin and Triple H, Raw 2001. Now this match got famous real fast for one reason. Triple H somehow fought through agony to finish the bout, even though he'd literally felt his quadricep muscle roll up one of his legs. Yeah, apologies to anybody who happens to be eating whilst watching this video right now and vomited into their mouths just picturing that. How Hunter managed to sustain a Walls of Jericho from Chris Jericho on the announce desk despite that pain is unreal. But yeah, he did it. He somehow withstood that. That is insane. Before that landmark injury blighted it, the match was red hot generally. Jericho and Chris Benoit had combined to make one hell of a team in mid-2001, and the two-man power trick gimmick that Hunter and Steve Austin had been working was starting to pay dividends following a strange, almost awkward start. In a twisted way, Triple H being struck down with a quad tear elevated this random episode of Raw in the eyes of fans. It was hard to forget his bravery, and footage of the walls atop that announce desk has become stuff of legend in decades since. If only the injury hadn't happened, eh? Who knows what quality this foursome could have delivered in a rematch on TV or pay-per-view after the fact. Revisiting the match is not for everybody due to the grisly image of a battered Trips being helped up the ramp, but everything pre-injury is an essential watch for those who love tag team wrestling spliced with WWF/WWE style drama. Now I'm extending my hand and looking for the tag from my fellow glorious egg, Mr. Andy Murray. Take it away, sir.
Thank you very much, Gareth, and here comes number 90, Charlotte Flair versus Rhea Ripley from WrestleMania 39. WrestleMania 36 was supposed to be Rhea Ripley's big coming out party, her grand debut on the grandest stage of them all. Instead, it ended up looking like a dress rehearsal in an empty gym with folding chairs stacked against the wall, and zero fans, zero atmosphere as well because, you know, pandemic. And if that wasn't bad enough, Rhea went on to lose her NXT Women's title to Charlotte Flair in a match she probably should have won. Fast forward 3 years to WrestleMania 39. Rhea is not just on the card, she is higher up the card, and this time she is the star. Bigger, badder, and ready to wreck everybody. She and Charlotte went at it again, this time for the SmackDown Women's title, and let's just say the sequel was better than the original in every single way. Ripley finally got the redemption she'd been waiting for, and Flair really made her look like an unstoppable force of nature. Of course, Charlotte being Charlotte also meant that she wasn't going to take it easy. She ended up with what looked like a broken nose in the middle of the match, but she powered through like nothing had happened. That, my friends, is grit. Or maybe adrenaline, or maybe a little bit of both. Either way, massive respect. Charlotte made sure that the match stayed at that epic main event worthy level for the duration. And when Ripley's hand was raised in the end with 67,000 fans losing their mind, this was the closure that Rhea had been waiting for. The memory of WrestleMania 36's silent disaster dissolved away. Number 89, Sasha Banks versus Bayley, NXT TakeOver Brooklyn 2015. When Sasha Banks and Bayley hit the ring at TakeOver Brooklyn, they weren't just wrestling each other, they were wrestling history itself. Up to that point, WWE's track record with women's wrestling could charitably be described as rough and was not always must-see television. But Sasha and Bayley came along and said, nah, we're going to show everybody what this division can be. And boy, did they ever. In front of a red-hot Brooklyn crowd, the two real-life best friends went nearly 20 minutes, and they put on a generational classic. Bayley was the ultimate underdog, the pure-hearted fan favourite, and Sasha was the boss in every sense, cocky, smug, and downright mean when the moment called for it. Together, their chemistry was off the charts. This wasn't just a women's match that exceeded expectations, it was a match that redefined them. And the best part was the ripple effect and the positive impact it would go on to have on women's wrestling in WWE as a whole. And just to hammer it home, Becky Lynch and Charlotte came out afterwards for a big post-match hug between all four horsewomen, signalling the women's revolution wasn't just a corporate buzzword, it was alive and happening in real time. Sasha versus Bayley in Brooklyn wasn't just a great match, it was a line in the sand, a before and after moment, the match that helped shift WWE from diva fluff to legitimate respect. Number 88, John Cena versus Umaga from Royal Rumble 2007. Royal Rumble 2007 brought last man standing action for the man they called Super Cena. That year, WWE figured that the best way to feed into the annual Rumble match was to have John Cena and Umaga pace the living crap out of each other for a solid 23 minutes. Good news, they were absolutely correct. This was one of the matches used by staunch Cena fans as fuel against the non-stop bombardments from haters claiming John couldn't wrestle for many years. Now, a lot of fans had already made up their minds about WWE's poster boy by 2007. He was there to be jeered, not cheered. Not so quietly, however, Cena went about his business by delivering excellent matches like this, which is one of the best in his career when the heat was on. For his part, Umaga matched up well as a monster antagonist who could believably keep Cena down for the count of 10 and take his WWE title home. In the match itself, Cena did what Cena does. He took an absurd beating, fought from underneath, and somehow found a way to dig deep and survive. Umaga absolutely demolished him for chunks, and yet Super Cena clawed back, using every ounce of grit and strength to finally keep the Samoan bulldozer down for the 10 count. It was a showcase for both men, and Umaga came out of it looking like a legitimate beast who belonged in the main event scene. So if you ever find yourself doubting John Cena's in-ring chops, do yourself a favour. Go back and watch this. You'll see why it's one of the best of that man's long career. Number 87, Brock Lesnar versus John Cena from Extreme Rules 2012. When Brock Lesnar left WWE in 2004, it felt massive. Here was this freak athlete who could have been the face of the company for a decade, and he just walked away. Then he went to the UFC, smashed a few skulls for fun, and suddenly Brock was a legit crossover star. By 2012, when he came back to WWE, the hype was off the charts, and his first opponent was none other than John Cena. Extreme Rules 2012 wasn't your typical WWE match. From the opening bell, Brock brought his UFC aura into the squared circle. He was brutal, reckless, and, honestly, kinda terrifying. He busted Cena open early, threw him around like a sack of potatoes, and generally made it look like a sanctioned mugging. And for a while, it felt like Cena might not even survive, in kayfabe, let alone win. But win is exactly what Cena did, and the result stunned people, especially given just how much of a wreck that John looked by the end of it. His victory came with a giant purple welt on his face and a few gallons of blood lost, but it showed fans a side of Cena they hadn't seen in years. Vulnerable, desperate, but still standing. Now, let's get this one thing absolutely straight. Brock definitely should have won this match, but Cena gonna Cena, and let's be honest, it's not like the outcome did a great deal of long-term damage. Number 86, Walter vs. Ilya Dragunov, NXT UK, 29th of October, 2020. Sometimes WWE's hidden gems don't happen in front of stadiums full of screaming fans. Sometimes they happen in a tiny London studio in the middle of a pandemic with nobody there to cheer or gasp or even chant "Fight Forever." That was the setting for Walter vs. Ilya Dragunov on NXT UK in October 2020, as a duo brought their long-running feud from WXW to the big leagues. And even without an audience, these two tore the house down. Walter, now known as Gunther, was already being talked about as one of the best in the world. He had the aura of an old-school bruiser, the kind of wrestler that you could see stepping into Madison Square Garden in the 1970s and fighting Bruno Sammartino. And of course, he threw chops that sounded like gunshots, especially in this empty TV studio. And across the ring from him was Ilya Dragunov, the fiery underdog with zero quit. Together, they crafted a 30-minute war that felt raw, unfiltered, and absolutely brutal. Every strike mattered, every near fall felt earned. Ilya kept clawing back, refusing to die, while Walter just kept clubbing him down with sledgehammer forearms. It wasn't pretty wrestling, it was survival. That's what made it unforgettable. The crazy thing is, because this was stuck on NXT UK during the pandemic, a lot of fans who maybe only watched Raw or SmackDown didn't even catch it live. But word spread, social media blew up, people were calling it one of the best WWE matches of the year, maybe even the decade, and if you've seen it, you know why. Somehow, Gunther and Ilya were able to match their indie level in a WWE setting. And perhaps because of the setting, that quiet, empty, echoey room, it felt very unlike a typical WWE match. The brutality was off the charts, and really, this was a moment in time. Number 85, Owen Hart versus the British Bulldog from Raw on the 3rd of March 1997. In 1997, WWE introduced the brand new European Championship. To crown the first champion, they went to Berlin, Germany for a tournament final between two family members, Owen Hart and the British Bulldog. Now, if you know anything about these two, they were a tag team at the time, but they were also very competitive. So when they went one-on-one, magic was bound to happen. The match itself was very pure wrestling. Boots, tights, holds, counters, psychology, and everything in between. They didn't rush either. They built the story, escalating the pace, and the crowd was hanging on every single move. By the end, the German fans were electric, desperate to see who would be crowned the first European champion. The downside was the production values. Filmed overseas with less than stellar equipment, a potato by the looks of things, the broadcast looked more like an indie show than WWE's flagship. And to make things even weirder, the commentary was piped in afterwards, so didn't exactly feel as natural as it could have. But if you can look past that, what you get is one of the purest wrestling matches of the era. Two family members, two tag partners putting on a clinic that still holds up today, and in hindsight may have been one of Bulldog's last truly great singles matches. Number 84, Johnny Gargano vs Andrade, NXT TakeOver Philadelphia. At TakeOver Philadelphia in 2018, Johnny Gargano challenged Andrade, backed by the ever-scheming Zelina Vega, for the NXT Championship, and what they delivered was the most cutting-edge WWE match in years, and actually, according to the Wrestling Observer, the first 5-star match in the company in many a moon. Gargano and Andrade absolutely loaded this match with big moves, high spots, and holy crap moments, but they balanced it out with pacing, emotion, and storytelling. Gargano was the underdog, the fan favourite, and the people wanted to see him climb the mountain. Andrade was the arrogant champion who knew exactly how good he was and loved rubbing it in everybody's faces. For nearly 30 minutes they went back and forth, building the suspense until the Philly crowd was living and dying on every momentum swing. Zelina Vega added to the drama as well, interfering at key moments and reminding everyone of why she's one of the best managers in the game. When it was over, Andrade retained, but it didn't matter. The match itself was the story. Fans and critics alike showered it with praise, calling it one of the best TakeOver main events ever, and for Andrade, it was arguably his career highlight. For Gargano, it was another chapter in his rise as the heart and soul of NXT. Number 83, Owen Hart and British Bulldog vs Shawn Michaels and Steve Austin, 28th of May 1997 episode of Raw. File this one under matches that make you do a double take. Yes, Shawn Michaels and Steve Austin were tag team partners once, but not only that, they were tag team champions. This was back when they couldn't stand each other as well, which made the whole thing kind of funny. And yet, on the 26th of May 1997, they actually worked together long enough to dethrone Owen Hart and the British Bulldog. Bulldog and Owen were phenomenal as champions, Owen with his silky smooth work and Bulldog with his powerhouse style. Against them, Shawn and Austin played the ultimate odd couple, bickering while somehow still kicking ass. The match was complete chaos, but in the best way. The tension between Shawn and Austin made every tag feel like a ticking time bomb, and while Owen and Bulldog did everything in their power to hold on to the belts when the dust settled, HBK and Stone Cold were the new champions, and the fans were buzzing. This wasn't just a good Raw main event, it was one of the best tag matches the show had ever produced. It had star power, drama, history, and a title change to boot. Number 82, Cody Rhodes and Goldust versus Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns from Battleground 2013. Battleground 2013 wasn't exactly a legendary pay-per-view, but one match stood tall, that being Cody and Dustin Rhodes, or Goldust if you will, versus The Shield. At the time, Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose were running roughshod over WWE. They were completely dominant and seemingly unstoppable. The story was perfect in that case. If Cody and Goldust lost, they were going to be fired. Worse still, their father, Dusty, would lose his role as an NXT trainer, so the stakes were sky high. Across the ring, the Shield were cold-blooded mercenaries for the Authority, and they were ready to crush the Rhodes family's every hope and dream. What followed was a tag team clinic. Goldust, the crafty veteran, showed he could still hang at the highest level, which he still can do today, by the way, 12 years later, while Cody wrestled with a fire that foreshadowed his eventual rise as a top star. On the other side, Rollins and Reigns looked every bit the sharks that WWE had built them up to be. The match was dramatic, emotional, and flat-out exciting from bell to bell. By the end, when Cody scored the win, the crowd erupted in one of the loudest ovations of the night. It wasn't just a victory, it was a family triumph. Daniel Bryan and Randy Orton may have headlined the pay-per-view, but make no mistake, the Rhodes brothers versus The Shield was the real main event. A reminder that when tag team wrestling is done right, it can outshine just about anything. Number 81, Cody Rhodes versus Seth Rollins, Hell in a Cell 2022. Some matches are remembered for a single image. In the case of Cody Rhodes versus Seth Rollins at Hell in a Cell 2022, it's the horrifying sight of Cody's chest and arm being covered in a deep purple bruise from a torn pec. It was grotesque, it was shocking, and it became the entire story of the match. Doctors probably wanted Cody nowhere near the ring. Most people wouldn't even want to pick up a grocery bag with that kind of injury, let alone wrestle a 25-minute cage match, but Cody, he powered through, proving he is either the toughest guy alive or completely insane. Maybe both. Rollins, ever the villain, played his role perfectly. He came out wearing polka dots, a jab at Cody's dad Dustin, and spent the entire match targeting the injury, laughing as Cody winced in pain. The visual of Cody fighting through that kind of damage only rallied the fans behind him even more. Every move hurt, every slam was torture, and yet he kept going. By the end, Cody won, cementing himself as WWE's top babyface. The performance was gutsy, brave, and unforgettable. Fans walked away knowing that they'd just witnessed something historic. Of course, Cody then immediately needed surgery and time off because, you know, the whole torn pec business. Sometimes wrestling is about more than just moves or titles. It's about moments that make you say, I can't believe he did that. And this was one of those moments. Sai, over to you.
Thanks, Murray. Let's keep this thing rolling with number 80, Sami Zayn versus Shinsuke Nakamura at NXT TakeOver Dallas. Shinsuke Nakamura arrived in WWE with a bang in early 2016, and Sami Zayn made sure of it. He was programmed against the Japanese star for Nakamura's first match at NXT TakeOver Dallas, which is always a big deal because you only get one chance to make a first impression, and in Nakamura's case, justify the hype that surrounded his signing. 20 minutes later, fans in Texas were on their feet applauding both men for one hell of a match. Nakamura's strikes sounded like shotgun blasts going off, but Zayn gave as good as he was getting by laying it in too. The live crowd in Dallas greeted Shinsuke like he was one of the biggest stars on the planet. It's often fascinating to look back on this period of NXT history pre-AEW. WWE satisfied hardcore wrestling fans by stacking these takeover specials with the kind of matches that would make Tony Khan foam at the mouth. And then they presented something else entirely on episodes of Raw and SmackDown to cater to a more casual audience. Let's face it, they were mostly just catering to Vince McMahon. Shinsuke's twin Bumaye attacks finished the bout and gave him his very first win as a WWE star, and of course, main roster success would follow. Zayn might not have been the focal point throughout this one, but he proved how valuable he was to the company's cause. Stunning work by everyone involved. Number 79, Cody Rhodes versus AJ Styles at Backlash 2024. There were 3 main eventers at Backlash 24, Cody Rhodes, AJ Styles, and the live crowd at Lyon, France. Cody was defending his newly won WWE title after finishing the story at Mania, and AJ smartly brought his own sub-story by discussing the possibility that this could be feasibly one of his last shots at the biggest belt in the game. Sure, that wouldn't actually be the case, but the storyline ruled and Styles was in the physical shape of his life for this run. Both men ran through all of the spots and moves that you would expect from them, but nothing was rushed. These two masters went over 27 minutes without going at breakneck pace 100% of the time. They started off with a decent enough tempo before settling into a groove and letting the live crowd breathe, and conveniently of course this also left room for the commentators to tell a story for the fans watching at home. Perhaps most importantly though, it gave France an opportunity to go absolutely bonkers. Try as he might, Styles struggled to stop himself from smiling as the venue roared and chanted pre-match, and then all the way throughout. Rhodes and Styles would struggle to top this one in the following month's Clash at the Castle events, and that really speaks volumes despite the addition of an I Quit stipulation. Cody's title reign got off to a rip-roaring start, and Styles proved that he still had gas in the tank for main events. Number 78, the Wyatt family versus The Shield, Elimination Chamber 2014. Fans were chanting "This is awesome" before the bell even sounded on The Shield versus the Wyatt family at Elim Chamber 2014. Sometimes that can feel a little bit forced, almost like the live crowd is trying to make a situation seem bigger than it actually is, but that's not the case here. WWE simply programmed 2 dominant stables against each other and just let them go for it. Luke Harper and Eric Rowan performed a dazzling double chokeslam from one announce desk through another on Roman Reigns. Dean Ambrose and Bray Wyatt went walkies up into the stands, and that's just to get things started. There was an electric atmosphere to this one, which is kind of handy because they followed up Darren Young and Titus O'Neil, and there was just not a lot going on there. This 6-man tag was the tonic that the audience required to get their energy back up. WWE fans hadn't quite decided that Roman should be booed out of the buildings yet either. If anything, most supporters at the time would have chosen him over Batista as the 2014 Royal Rumble winner. Although to be fair, anything would have been better than Batista that year. As soon as it was over, this match was being thrown around as a possible match of the year contender. In February, no less. Yes, it was that good. It really did set the stage for all members of The Shield and Bray Wyatt to go on to be main eventers in their own rights. Number 77, Rey Mysterio vs Chris Jericho, The Bash 2009. Jericho and Mysterio had some superb clashes under the WCW banner in the late 90s. Their battles over the company's cruiserweight title always delivered some excitement, chiefly because Rey was so impressively athletic and Jericho, despite being the bigger man, could keep up with Mysterio's speed without struggling. If this was a WCW list, you just know that one of Rey's matches versus Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko or Jericho would have sneaked up the roster. The good news is that Jericho and Mysterio went at it again in WWE for the beloved Intercontinental title in 2009. Jericho and Ray repeated some old spots without rehashing just for the sake of it. They knew they could rely on the fans to pop for the 619 and various things in Jericho's armory, but this was more than a mere procession of moves for the sake of moves. These guys had a story to tell, and WWE gave them around 15 minutes to do it. A sweet transition out of the 619 into the walls of Jericho had everyone in awe, and so did Mysterio wearing a second mask underneath the one that Chris attempted to rip clean off. This proved to be a rare example of a wrestling babyface actually being kinda smart. Who knew they were capable of such things? Number 76, The Rock vs Triple H, SummerSlam 1998. Being brutally honest, the main attraction at SummerSlam 98 was a bit of a letdown. Austin and The Undertaker were epic individually and had countless great matches against many others, but the pair never had chemistry as opponents. They were also right up against it after Triple H and The Rock blew the roof off of Madison Square Garden in the sub-main event slot. Their ladder match for the Intercontinental title was of course an attempt to better what Michaels and Ramon had achieved approximately 4 years earlier in the same building at WrestleMania 10. They wouldn't achieve that, at least not in the minds of many, but Rock and Hunter put on a show that got ultra physical and pretty much set the scene for this combo to headline numerous pay-per-views in years to come. It's a major compliment to both guys that this would have been a better finale rather than Austin vs Taker. Of course, MSG greeted the headliners like the stars they were, but their nuts and bolts bouts couldn't heighten the drama any further than it already had been. Triple H seizing the Intercontinental belt and being aided by a China low blow had the Garden at a fever pitch. Number 75, Money in the Bank, WrestleMania 21. The first Money in the Bank ladder match felt like a revolutionary concept back in 2005. No less than 6 wrestlers would fight to haul down a briefcase containing a contract that would guarantee them a world title shot at any point. WWE had found their latest star-making vehicle, but none of that would matter to fans if the initial bout stunk out WrestleMania 21, and of course it didn't, otherwise we wouldn't have Money in the Bank here 20 years later. Jericho, Benoit, Edge, Kane, Benjamin and Christian all worked hard to make sure the new gimmick landed the way that WWE wanted it to. Also, what a lineup of workers, by the way, most of which had previous when it came to inventive spots in ladder matches. The only one that didn't was Kane, and you can throw him in as a powerful wild card and people were keen to see what would happen. Everyone had a realistic shot at winning the thing, and it really felt like fans were going into the unknown by watching WWE conceptualize a year-long #1 contendership that could be cashed in at any time. Sure, subsequent Money in the Bank ladder matches have bashed fans over the head with a kind of more of the same feeling, but you never forget your first. Number 74, The Shield versus Daniel Bryan, Kane and Ryback, TLC 2012. Some of the best WWE matches sneak up on you, and that's precisely what happened at TLC 2012. Sure, this match had a chance to be good, but it's fair to say no one really expected this much out of it. The babyface team of Daniel Bryan, Kane and Ryback instantly attacked the Shield during their entrance and the fight was on. What resulted was a greatest hits package of TLC spots, including Rollins being sent tumbling through 4 tables courtesy of Ryback shoving him off a ladder. This was actually the Shield's first televised match as a collective, and it was one hell of a way to kick things off. You have to imagine there were high fives all around backstage after this was said and done. But even aside Rollins, Ambrose and Reigns coming together as a fantastic team, we have to give some compliments to Team Hell No and Ryback. The big guy was booked to look really strong and dominant, perhaps even more so than Kane. Now, TLC 2012 was a bit of a lackluster card overall, so the show really needed something so hot that made it worthwhile, and this is exactly what that was. Number 73, Daniel Bryan vs CM Punk at Over the Limit 2012. Grappling crimes were committed on the 20th of May 2012 when WWE decreed that John Cena vs John Laurinaitis should be the main event for the 3rd and final Over the Limit pay-per-view. On the undercard we had matches like Christian vs Cody, a 4-way for the world title with Sheamus, Orton, Del Rio and Jericho, oh yeah, and the small matter of Punk vs Bryan for the WWE title. Even Johnny Ace headlining instead of them couldn't dampen the spirits of the 2 indie darlings. They were enthused by the prospect of working together in a lengthy match on pay-per-view, and both knew they'd be able to put on a clinic that would stick 2 fingers up at Vince's decision-making. Punk and Bryan got almost 25 minutes, and every single one of them kept your eyes glued open. The finish was especially killer. CM Punk countered Bryan's yes lock by moving deftly into a pinning situation. Then, as if to hammer home the pain of that submission, he tapped out right after the referee had counted to 3. That naturally infuriated Bryan. He believed he should have been handed the win. No dice. Punk escaped this round, which meant the pair had to go hammer and tongs again, no way out the following month. Except WWE put Kane into things for some reason. But regardless, this match at Over the Limit, chef's kiss. Number 72, Brock Lesnar vs Kurt Angle, SmackDown, September the 18th, 2003. There's quite the backstory to this match. Kurt Angle sadly received a phone call alerting him to the fact that his sister had died of a heroin overdose the night before wrestling Brock Lesnar in a 60-minute Iron Man match on SmackDown. Understandably struggling to cope with this news, Kurt grabbed around 20 extra strength Vicodin and swallowed them. That knocked him out cold and he didn't wake up until 4 hours before he was due to hit the ring. Angle came to, went to the venue and wrestled like it was no big deal whatsoever. WWE had been calling the Olympian all day, but he didn't pick up because he was out for the count. Later, Kurt would go on to say that having a lengthy and taxing wrestling match to focus on helped him get through the agony of his sister's passing. Somehow, despite all of this, Kurt went the full hour with Brock in an Iron Man that the latter won 5-4. Nobody watching inside the arena or at home on TV could have known that Angle was in no state to actually work. That 60-minute clash remains one of the most impressive twin performances on free television to this day. I mean, it's a great match as it is, but when you know the backstory to it, doubly so. Angle worked one of the best matches in SmackDown history, regardless of what was going on in his personal life or how he was feeling mentally or physically. Number 71, Charlotte Flair vs Becky Lynch vs Sasha Banks at WrestleMania 32. Nobody should ever attempt to downplay the importance of WrestleMania 32 to women's wrestling in WWE. Lita appeared before the match to announce that the old Divas title was no more, goodbye butterfly belt. And instead, Flair, Lynch and Banks will be fighting over the classic women's title, or a newfangled version of it anyway. This was a big deal because it upped the credibility of this match infinitely. The three largely stayed away from the usual one-in, one-out tropes of triple threats, and there was a clear bid to make this all about three equals who could all stake a claim to being champion. Eventually, Charlotte took the win by using her flashy figure 8 submission, and commentary would cry foul about Ric Flair, who was ringside with his daughter, holding Sasha's foot and thus preventing her from breaking up the hold. This neat plot point sowed seeds for further matches to come, and it protected Becky just enough without wrecking Charlotte's big moments. WWE waved goodbye to the wishy-washy Divas tag with this match, and suddenly those in the women's division were superstars just like their male counterparts. And frankly, it was a welcome change. Charlotte, Becky and Sasha didn't fit into the whole Divas thing anyway. They were wrestlers. And also, it doesn't just crack the 100 here on historical merit alone, it's a really good match, bringing the greatness of NXT at that time onto WrestleMania's grand stage. That's me done for a little bit, so from one side to another, take it away, Simon Miller.
Thank you very much, Si. It's me, Simon Miller, so you can all get mad, but I'm going to hit you with number 70, Sami Zayn versus Kevin Owens at the 2025 Elimination Chamber. Yes, WWE once said it was the last time ever for Kevin Owens versus Sami Zayn under their banner, but let's never overlook the power of a long-term rivalry. They've fallen out and mended fences time and time again, but there is something fascinating about their relationship. You believe it because it's real. In terms of their WWE scraps, I think many would likely agree the Elimination Chamber was the best. It was in Toronto, which helped because of the Canadian feel to all of this, and there was proper beef. KO was furious that Zayn hadn't helped him in his fight against Cody Rhodes. Why didn't you pick my side? Therefore, Owens went mad, pile drove everybody, and became a top-tier heel. I would imagine that Kevin and Sami probably knew this could be their last go-around, so they did everything they could to take their Ring of Honor and NXT stuff and just blew the roof off the place. It was unsanctioned too, meaning they did some insane spots. They also made it work by going nuts as soon as the bell rang. You also get the Randy Orton return when Owens was ready to finish his pal off for good, so there's story everywhere as well. I would guess it will be the ending of their entire saga, and what an incredible finish. Two of the best of the modern era, and they prove it right here. If you haven't seen it and you like these two, you gotta change that right now. Number 69, Marty Jannetty versus Shawn Michaels at the July 19th, 1993 Raw. This almost ties into the last entry because the story was similar. Two former friends and tag partners who had split up and wanted blood. Even back in 1993 when they first clashed at the Raw Rumble, the pre-internet had a meltdown because it wasn't as good as expected. There had been many a reason for this too, mostly that Marty had had a heavy night beforehand. There's no smoke without fire, and Jannetty was shown the door for his behaviour, but seemingly this was just a slap on the wrist. He was back by the summer, ready for a renewed push, and he won the IC title from the Heartbreak Kid. Then he lost it back to Shawn, so the feud was on. Come July and Raw, which was still a pretty new show, both guys went out there to prove a point. I guess they were on TV, so yeah. They hit a home run, they were both on their game, and were for all the subsequent matches that followed. It's exactly what fans had been wanting. It goes 23 minutes as well, which would be huge for Raw even today, let alone back then. And it's why it needs more love, especially as most would likely go to the Raw Rumble or the rematch they had in May. This one, many believe, is better, and you can still see it. A style that slowly opened the door for what we see today. Number 68, Sheamus versus Walter at Clash at the Castle 2022, which apparently wasn't even meant to happen. Somebody else was penciled in for Gunther on this night when Sheamus got drafted in. Thank goodness too, this was one of the best matches of modern times. The Intercontinental title was on the line as well, which meant everything to the Irishman as it was the only belt he'd never won. Gunther was slowly turning the IC Championship into a must-have prize too, so this was pitched perfectly. It couldn't have come at a better time. How both guys walked around the next day, I do not know, because my gosh, calling this hard-hitting feels unfair, because they basically tried to kill each other. They never did anything too silly either and just grounded it in the idea of having a fight, and it rules. The way Sheamus gets sympathy as the babyface in peril should be studied too, and Gunther was ready to kill him. I think he likely made a lot of new fans this night. It just showed not everything has to be a technical classic, and really this should be considered one of the best IC title matches ever. That's the level, it's 5 stars and then some. It could be ranked even higher than this and I would get it, It is truly, truly brilliant. Number 67, Shawn Michaels vs. Chris Jericho at No Mercy 2008. So we all know that when Chris Jericho went mega heel around this time, it was proof he just had a radar for when to change up his character. Serious Jericho in his suit and big words was fantastic. Shawn Michaels was Shawn Michaels, so no surprise there, but the real joy of this particular match was the use of the ladder. It was billed as such a stipulation, but I think both guys had looked at the current climate and realized crazy bumps had become the norm. So they weren't going to do that, they were going to come up with something different. The rivalry was also fierce by the time No Mercy 2008 rolled around, so this needed some extra heat, and yeah, they grabbed the ladder and used it like it was death. It was almost like whoever got their hands on it had a newfound ally, and the way that Jericho sells his leg looks like it's about to fall off. It's a little bit frustrating because sometimes when talking about these matches, this one gets overlooked, but it shouldn't. If anything, it makes more sense, because if somebody had told you it's fine to use a ladder as a weapon, yeah, you would. It also added proper drama to the match and tied into the finish. It's a masterclass in how and when to not do what others are doing, or something like that. And of course it came from these guys. I mean, they're a couple of all-timers. Number 66, Gunther vs. Sami Zayn at WrestleMania 40. So I do get it if you want to switch this with the Sheamus match. It's your choice. And the reason it ranks higher today is because it was the babyface finally winning the IC title at WrestleMania. That's the whole point of the show. Gunther deserves all the praise, as if you're going to hold that thing for a record time of 666 days, the end goal has to be a good guy feeling like a hero for stopping you. Bingo. People were desperate for Zayn to do it, not only because they loved him, but because Gunther was a bad man, so somebody had to stop him. It was just everything wrestling needs to work, and the match never did anything it didn't need. The champion basically beat up Sami Zayn until he hit his go button, hit that damn avalanche brainbuster before Helluva kicking his way to gold. Then sort of collapsed because again, Gunther had destroyed him. Some people even said it was a modern Steamboat Macho Man from WrestleMania 3, which is the highest of praise, and there were moments where the ring general actually felt invincible. It was Zayn who had to go out there and try and chop him down. Like a tree. So it is a Mania classic, and another reason this title reign is looked at so fondly. It wasn't just for a headline. We really did make the Intercontinental title feel like it was important again. Flubbed me sideways, that was long overdue. Number 65, Charlotte Flair vs. Sasha Banks at Hell in a Cell 2016. So it was hard to find a good Hell in a Cell match by the time 2016 rolled round. WWE had taken that concept and run it into the ground to help pay-per-view numbers. Forget the time it used to bring people fear. Now it was just a gimmick. It sucked. There are so many examples of feuds just being put in the thing because it was something to do, which is when Sasha Banks and Charlotte Flair entered this structure. And yeah, this worked because for one, they'd been constant enemies since NXT and had just gone through hating each other at WrestleMania 32. It was also the first ever women's Hell in a Cell, so I think that gave them added impetus, and then Flair attacked Sasha as the damn thing was being lowered to the ground. That jumpstart energy was held right until the end. It was brutal from there and got so violent, I think both guys knew. Can't let the side down here, we got to prove a point, and they really did. It is a shame WWE didn't capitalize on this, as it could have reignited the whole stipulation, but hey ho, doesn't mean this one should be ignored. Flair and Banks killed it, and almost killed each other, as they so often do. Number 64, Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn versus the Usos at WrestleMania 39. I love this match. Maybe it is better in hindsight, as Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn would be the only people that weekend to weaken the bloodline, but everybody here is just on fire. Jimmy and Jay totally get their role too, and their chemistry, dare I say it, is perfect. I could have watched them feud for the tag titles for years. There's the other joy here, as it was the main event of WrestleMania Night 1, and those belts were on the line. If you know anything about Vince McMahon's WWE, you knew this was next to an impossibility, and yet here we were. We'd done it. Tag Team Wrestling was closing the biggest show of the year. Then a year later, these belts would be merged, and whoops, let's not worry about that. Seeing Sami and KO come together again was just awesome too, and the Usos were brilliant at this point. The association with Roman Reigns had made them feel more crucial to the program than ever, and I think that all comes through the screen when you're watching. They all just seem so happy to be there too. That works. Let's not forget that Sami had been in the bloodline before this, and that Owens was always fighting Roman and the rest of them. This was going to be the end of their story, no matter what Cody Rhodes was going to do the following evening. I think this just gave fans hope, because it really did feel like a new dawn for WWE, and my gosh, we needed that, a creative spark to get us all invested. Of course, these four would be part of it too. The dudes knew what the mission was, and they achieved it effortlessly. It's so good, and given the way of the world, it may never happen again. I really don't know how the tag team titles ever get back to this point. Maybe, just maybe though, that and makes it just a little bit more special. Number 63, Bret Hart versus Diesel at the Survivor Series 1995. Do you want to see a Bret Hart match that makes you go, I get it, that's why he's the best? Go sit down with the Hitman versus Diesel from the 1995 Survivor Series. It's just so damn logical. Kevin Nash has always maintained that he was best when he had a smaller guy that could create movement around him. And I don't know whether he said that to Bret or not, but he took that as a challenge when he took a bat and hit a home run. All of this was the end for Diesel's lengthy WWF title reign, and this kind of ties in as well. As soon as Big Daddy Cool had won the World Championship, Vince McMahon decided, well, you better start selling like Hulk Hogan. Nobody wanted that. We wanted to see Diesel be a beast, because look at the guy, he was massive. Thankfully, Hart ignored everything his boss did want and said to Diesel, yeah, you're going to kick my ass, but I'm going to chop you down like a tree. And it is just the best big guy versus not as big a guy match you could hope for. It actually feels like they're fighting. As you get into the match too, you will notice that Bret basically becomes a heel, because he realizes that if he is going to do this, he's going to have to bite a little bit, or just stick the boot in a little bit harder. That just pisses off Diesel too, who starts hurling around the Hitman like he was a child. They have such good damn chemistry. You should also check out their other matches as well, including the one at the Royal Rumble. Really, they all serve as a companion piece, but this is probably the star on top of the tree. It was also during their series when you did have that table bump of Bret Hart being knocked off the apron and crashing through the wood. Look what damage that did. Everybody is still doing it today. You can actually make the claim as well, this is Kevin Nash's best match ever. I mean, I'm sure Shawn Michaels would have something to say about that, but it truly is brilliant, and I love it. I mean, the fact as I am talking to you, it's 30 years old, but actually could main event a pay-per-view today? Well, it just sums up how good they both were, and how we kind of didn't do right by Diesel. If only all of his matches had been like this. Number 62, Bayley versus Sasha Banks at NXT TakeOver Respect. An 18-minute scorcher from NXT TakeOver Brooklyn basically whet the appetite for anything these two were going to do moving forward. Bayley and Sasha Banks were born to wrestle each other. Sounds weird, but it's true. WWF bigwigs knew this as well, so when we did get to TakeOver Respect, they said, hey man, why don't you two do an Iron Woman match? It was basically 30 minutes of incredible wrestling. Also went to show that the world was changing, that we had faith in these two, as we should have done, and they tore the house down inside Full Sail University. There were only 3 short seconds left on the clock when the deciding submission happened too, and that just meant it had all the drama, which is what you want in an Iron Woman match. I mean, you know it's going to go 30 minutes or 60 minutes, so the most important part of the clock are the final few seconds, and here they made that count for double. What you really need to do is watch this back-to-back with the Brooklyn match, because they're both absolutely excellent. Let's not forget this one goes 12 minutes longer, and it's still brilliant. They probably could have done 90 minutes and we would have had the same result. The NXT fans totally loved it too, and it did open the door for what the main roster was going to do after this. And if you want to see Sasha Banks at her villainous best, well, you go to this. But at one point, she pokes Bayley in the eye and actually steals objects from little girls at ringside who were dressed as Bayley. I mean, that's just mean, and Sasha has the audacity to laugh about it. As for Bayley, well, it really is the same in 2025. She is the ultimate babyface. All of the 5 falls in this match are timed to perfection too to keep the audience invested. So if you want to say this is no filler or killer, just a reference to Sum 41, you absolutely can. Bayley and Sasha used every single second, and they used it damn well. Number 61, Randy Savage versus Ricky Steamboat at WrestleMania 3. I mean, WrestleMania 3 basically feels like it happened in a different reality at this point, but even today, people walk around saying that this Intercontinental title classic is one of the best WrestleMania matches ever. It's also damn important in terms of what it did for the industry. I'll repeat what I said earlier. Go and watch this, and then what people do in the ring today. There is an absolute connection there. It's also got a great story behind it, because Randy Savage was very much a wrestler who liked to write down every single move he did do, and then pass the piece of paper over to his opponent and say, haha, we should do this. Now, that's not how Ricky Steamboat worked, but he was such a nice man, he was like, you know what, fine. And the proof was in the pudding. This stands out a mile. Nothing on the WrestleMania 3 card in terms of the in-ring was ever going to come close to this. And of course, we include Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant in that. I mean, that bout absolutely changed the arc of professional wrestling. But in terms of bell-to-bell stuff, Randy and Steamboat had it down. You also have managers here, which we always forget to talk about because George Steele and Miss Elizabeth are on the outside. And let's not forget how big the IC title felt after this. I mean, as soon as Ricky does apply the most devastating move in all of sports entertainment, surprise roll-up, and he gets the 1, 2, 3, well, that damn championship felt bigger than ever. Also, Ricky Steamboat was the ultimate babyface, so it made you feel warm and fuzzy in your tum-tum. And again, it's WrestleMania. That's always the idea. And given that it was only the third event in the damn franchise, well, it's one of those early memories that just makes you want to be a fan. That's it for me for now. I will be back later, but Pollard, you're up.
Oh, cheers for that, Miller. As a big Charles Crowley fan, boo that man. Anyways, number 60, Rey Mysterio and Edge versus Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit. No Mercy 2002. Those of a certain vintage will lean back in their seats, sigh a loving sigh, and mutter, the SmackDown 6. Seriously, the second half of 2002 into 2003 was a glorious time for the Blue Brand. With Paul Heyman understanding how to get the very best out of the workers at his disposal, and man, did he have some world-class workers on SmackDown back then. One of the best SmackDown 6 bouts came at No Mercy. There, enemies turned partners Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit, they beat good buddies Rey Mysterio and Edge to become the inaugural WWE Tag Team Champions, the first SmackDown-specific tag champs, and it was stunning. Miscommunication threatened to derail Angle and Benoit's quest, while over on the other side of the ring, Edge and Ray, who'd only been in the company a couple of months, they produced some truly dazzling double teamwork. A rolling reversal spot for the finish was so smooth that it almost summed up Kurt Angle's style. Of course, Angle stood out as he usually did, but all four of these guys deserved a standing ovation from the arena and from their peers backstage. You just look at it and think, poor Trish Stratus and Victoria, they had to follow this with a 5-minute match for the women's title. Death spot indeed. Number 59, Vince McMahon versus Shane McMahon, WrestleMania 17. There will be those hammering fists against desks and wondering aloud how this nabbed the spot so high up. But have you watched it recently? Granted, some out there will understandably turn their noses up at anything to do with Vince McMahon these days, but Vince versus Shane was some brawl and then some, proving to be the perfect slice of McMahon family drama at a time when that was still the in thing. Many consider WrestleMania 17 to be the greatest Mania ever, even now, approaching 25 years later. Back in 2001 though, seeing Linda McMahon rise up from a wheelchair to boot her disgraceful husband right in the balls, that is genuinely one of the biggest pops you will ever hear. Really, this was a stone cold pop from the live crowd. A crowd who also enjoyed seeing Trish Stratus bite back at McMahon, not to mention Shane's Rob Van Dam Van Terminator tribute, which was shot from a delicious angle, legitimately looking like he'd put his feet right through his old man's skull. Admittedly, Mick Foley as a special guest referee, the old Micker didn't really have that much to do. But hey, Mick Foley, he's a big star, one always guaranteed to get a reaction from the live crowd, regardless of what role he was in. This is just a whole lot of fun, and way better than anyone could have ever expected. Number 58, Rob Van Dam versus John Cena, ECW One Night Stand 2006. The relaunch of the ECW brand did not exactly pan out like we'd all hoped, did it? No, but at least we got a couple of really good one-night stand events in 2005 and 2006. The success of that first one-night stand, not to mention the rise and fall of ECW DVD, sparked the idea for an ECW return, and the second one-night stand, that was the event that launched that return, complete with ECW icon Rob Van Dam going up against Vince McMahon's poster boy John Cena inside the Hammerstein Ballroom no less, and for Cena's WWE Championship. The end result spoke for itself, with many believing this was John Cena's best ever match up until this point in his career, even with a screwy finish where Edge interfered. Still, Rob Van Dam emerged victorious either way, having cashed in his Money in the Bank briefcase, having seen Cena wildly booed, his t-shirt famously thrown back to Cena by the rabid crowd, and the chemistry between RVD and Big Match John, it was pitch perfect for what it needed to be on that night in that setting in that arena to those people, delivering a true classic. Of course, the less said about Van Dam getting suspended shortly after this for a drug issue, okay. But still, John Cena versus Rob Van Dam was special. Really special. Number 57, Steve Austin versus Bret Hart, Survivor Series 1996. When people think of Bret Hart and Steve Austin, they rightfully tend to think of WrestleMania 13. More on that one later. But don't be sleeping on this cracker from Survivor Series 96, where the two would magic inside Madison Square Garden. The winner would become the #1 contender for the WWF title, and these heated rivals were just perfect for each other. Bret, the technical wizard, starting to show a harder, meaner edge as he closed in on what seemed like an unthinkable heel turn. Austin himself a hell of a technical wrestler who'd not had to alter his ring style yet due to that unfortunate power-driver at SummerSlam 97. Austin was more like his old WCW self here, stunning Steve Austin, though he was throwing in a little of the more kick and punch style, the WWF main event style, but was still using Ted DiBiase's old $1 Million Dream submission as his finish, which would come back to haunt Stone Cold, where Bret borrowed a page from his WrestleMania 8 classic against Rowdy Roddy Piper, walking up the turnbuckles to use Austin's $1 Million Dream and momentum against him, pinning Steve for the 1, 2, 3. A slow burn masterpiece, the perfect taster and teaser for what lay ahead the following year at WrestleMania 13. Number 56, CM Punk vs John Cena, Raw, 25th of February 2013. The Undertaker had returned on a house show the prior weekend, so many sitting down to watch the 25th of February 2013 edition of Raw, they kind of figured that the dead man would show up to get the ball rolling, causing a screwy finish and then building towards a WrestleMania 29 match against CM Punk. Nope. The dead man, the phenom, The Undertaker, he stayed away, letting old rivals Punk and John Cena produce one of the best matches on free WWE television in history. Both men were at the peak of their powers here, the top of their game, with Cena particularly having a chip on his shoulder at those "you can't wrestle" chants. And so he bust out some fresh moves here or there just to keep people on their toes. As for CM Punk, old Punker seemed to love the challenger facing John Cena, with their chemistry off the charts. And some of the near falls on offer in this match rival anything from the WWE archives. Seriously, we're talking The Rock versus Steve Austin from WrestleMania 17 levels of brilliance. And fans in attendance were totally fooled by some of those false finishes, as the crowd lapped up the trickery and storytelling, because hey, sometimes it's just nice to go along with the ride. WWE, Cena and Pepsi Phil provided pay-per-view quality on standard old regular television. The fact that The Undertaker didn't interfere was a blessing, and we get to that destination another way, with CM Punk winning a fatal 4-way to earn a crack at the Phenom and his legendary streak at WrestleMania. Simples. Number 55, The Undertaker vs The Rock vs Kurt Angle, Vengeance 2002. The Undertaker vs The Rock vs Kurt Angle from Vengeance 2002 is still considered to be one of the greatest triple threat matches of all time. Granted, the closing stretch was a little bit similar to a three-way from one of WWE's video games at the time, more than a logical wrestling match, but somehow it worked, finisher spam and all. WWE knew they needed to fill the void before New Monster and King of the Ring winner Brock Lesnar challenged for the world title at SummerSlam the following month. So they figured putting Rock and Angle in a title mix with Taker would at least get them through Vengeance. Nobody backstage likely assumed that these three guys would produce something as spectacular as they did, or that the Phenom would lose the belt, putting Brock on a collision course with Rocky rather than The Undertaker. That is what happened though. A string of counters and finishes had fans at fever pitch before Rock hit one last rock bottom on Kurt Angle for the 1, 2, 3. Being honest, Undertaker had to be delighted he was part of a match this dynamic after a few months of, let's be totally clear here, stinkers versus Steve Austin at Backlash, Hulk Hogan at Judgment Day, and Triple H at King of the Ring. Going full tilt with Rock and Angle suited the dead man, and he'd eventually move on to Lesnar himself later in the year. Few triple threats followed the one in, one out formula more closely than this, and fans, they absolutely lapped it up, man. Number 54, CM Punk vs Brock Lesnar, SummerSlam 2013. You can picture John Cena and Daniel Bryan warming up for their SummerSlam 2013 main event, checking out portions of this no disqualification cracker on monitors backstage. They would surely be laser focused, but there must have been a tiny bit of both men that thought, yeah, cheers guys, thanks for that. After all, out in the ring, CM Punk and Brock Lesnar were having one of the best bouts SummerSlam had ever witnessed. Lesnar's return matches since 2012 had split opinion. People dug what he did with Cena at Extreme Rules that year, but those same folks, they were not so hot on a 3-match series. Why do we need 3? Against Triple H at SummerSlam, WrestleMania 29, and then Extreme Rules 2013. So, come SummerSlam of 2013, hopes were high that the ever-impressive Punk, he would help Brock raise his game. The abridged version is, okay, he did. The game was well and truly raised by Brock. Paul Heyman stabbed Punk in the back to side with Lesnar, and that shocking moment followed 25 minutes of pure carnage. The Second City Saint was at his underdog best here, and Brock appeared to enjoy being the big old beast again, after a full year of tangling with fellow powerhouse Triple H. Come for the second era Lesnar domination, stay for CM Punk's well-crafted comebacks and plucky spirit. If you haven't watched this one in a long time, then it might catch you by surprise. Brock and Punk could have done even more together had they been given the chance. Or, if CM Punk didn't leave in early 2014. Number 53, Ric Flair vs. Mr. Perfect, Raw, 25th of January 1993. That's not fair to Flair. Nope, it certainly wasn't. But full disclosure here, I am so happy I get to chat about this one, as it's one of my favourite matches in wrestling history, period. You can hear the smile in my voice. A highlight of the early days of Raw, airing on just the 3rd ever episode in fact, and taking place at a rare time for WWF fans, where Mr. Perfect was indeed a babyface. Making it all the better, yes, Bobby Heenan was of course phenomenal on commentary, even if there was sadly no Gorilla Monsoon alongside the Brain by this point. Throughout the Flair run with the WWF from 91 to 93, Heenan was phenomenal in hammering home the fundamentals of the prick heel Nature Boy, laying it on thick, acting like everybody should step aside and just, let Ric Flair win. It was outstanding work from the Weasel, as was always the case with Bobby. And because Ric Flair was such a strong heel, that helped massively with the Perfect babyface turn, instantly making the Perfect one of the hottest babyfaces in the whole promotion. That babyface turn, it happened ahead of the 1992 Survivor Series, Perfect coming out of retirement to team with the Macho Man against Flair and Razor Ramon. An animosity between Perfect and Flair only escalated at the 93 Royal Rumble, where Perfect just went absolutely nuts on Ric Flair. It was great to see, eventually punting Flair out of the Rumble. So here we were, the January 25th 93 Raw, a loser leaves town match, which was easily the biggest match in Raw's early history, setting the tone for what fans would expect from Raw in the years to come. Flair's constant attempts to cheat had the crowd eating out of the wrestler's hands, salivating at the thought of Mr. Perfect giving Ric Flair what for and running him out of the company and back to WCW. And that's something that maybe goes a little overlooked all these years later, that WCW really did play a role here, albeit maybe a subconscious one to some, with this match having an us versus them feel to it, and WWF fans, they ate it up, man. Perfect may have had to slow his big bump in style by this point in time due to niggling injuries, notably back issues, but he was still a hell of a worker when motivated and in the right situation, and boy was Mr. P motivated and in the right situation on this very night. Of course, plenty of credit also has to go to Ric Flair, for he did a fantastic job in putting Mr. Perfect over, making Perfect look like $1,000,000, going out the right way as Flair, he set sail to head back to Atlanta. Number 52, Mick Foley vs. Edge, WrestleMania 22. A barbed wire sock. Yep. Mick Foley used that on Edge for a high spot in the pair's acclaimed hardcore match at WrestleMania 22. Eerily, that wasn't even the most painful thing the pair did that night, as Edge infamously speared Foley off the ring apron through a flaming table. This was everything that fans were looking forward to from Mick vs. Edge. Foley back to his big bump best, Edge en route to becoming a bona fide WWE headliner who clicked as an easy to hate rated R superstar heel. Together they meshed well as characters, and they had a lot of common behind the scenes as wrestling minds too. Simply put, there were few risks these fellas weren't willing to take if it meant entertaining the fans. Seeing Edge go into shock as Foley writhed around post table bump is still one of the most dramatic WWE scenes ever. The pain was surely, very real, but both guys did a stunning job putting across how close they'd come to death. Edge went face first into the fire, both figuratively and actually, literally. It was a different sort of toughness here shown to his persona, much like it happened with Triple H against Mick Foley in 1999 and into 2000, and likewise for Randy Orton against Mick in 2004. And Mick Foley, he deserves so much praise for not only putting his peer over so strongly here with Edge, but for doing so in a way that clearly put himself through so much pain. Number 51, Batista vs Triple H, Vengeance 2005. Sometimes a truly epic finish makes a match and it's the only thing fans remember. It's kind of unfortunate then that this was the case when it comes to Triple H vs Batista for Vengeance 2005, because these blokes, they put in some shift for approximately 25 minutes before that finishing sequence, and this Hell in a Cell bruiser is generally overlooked when people discuss the very best Hell in a Cell matches to this very day. Yes, the finish was absolutely superb. Triple H grabbing his trusty sledgehammer, trying to bash Big Dave in the head with it, but he couldn't quite manage that before being dropped with a sweet looking Batista bomb. The desperation on Hunter's face as he ready to strike was phenomenal, and Batista's timing with the move could not have been better, man. Absolutely nailed by the big fella. But earlier the pair had used everything from a steel chain to a steel chair wrapped in barbed wire, and unlike later matches once Hell in a Cell became, that standalone pay-per-view, this violence, it fit the storyline that framed the match. In other words, both guys hated one another after years of being stablemates in Evolution, so it was believable that they'd do everything to hurt the other man. Triple H pulling out all the stops but still not being able to beat the animal. When it mattered most, that was an all-timer of a story. No wonder fans in Las Vegas gave the game a standing ovation once it was all said and done. He'd more than earned that by putting Batista over so strongly. Right, and with that I am tagging out to the good brother himself, the main man, Andy Murray. Take it over, Andy H.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pollard. Let's keep rolling with the list. We're at the halfway point, baby. Here's number 50. Eddie Guerrero vs JBL, Judgment Day 2004. This pay-per-view was supposed to showcase Eddie's fiery babyface run as WWE Champion. Instead, it turned into a horror movie sponsored by the Red Cross. Eddie was bleeding so much you'd think he was auditioning for Nightmare on Elm Street. And the guy standing across the ring from him, JBL, the cowboy with the limo and the stock market promos, walked away as a made man. At the time, nobody wanted to give Bradshaw much credit. He was new to the main event scene, and after years as a tag mid-card guy with a big hat, it was quite a lot to take. But with WWE running out of stars, The Rock being in Hollywood, Austin being retired, and Goldberg and Lesnar both bailing out, JBL was shoved into the spotlight, and to his credit, he eventually became one of the best heels of his era. The finish to this match was a little bit messy, sure, with the disqualification leaving some people cold, but the match itself was brutal. A bloody, claret-soaked brawl that sold Eddie's heart and JBL's nasty streak. Guerrero didn't just blade here either, he basically emptied half of his body and kept on fighting. If you had a weak stomach, you probably had to watch this one through your fingers, or maybe just go out of the room for 20 minutes, I don't know. For JBL, this was his coming out party as a true villain. For Eddie, it was just yet another example of why he was so beloved. An underdog who refused to quit even when he looked like he might literally collapse. Not everybody loved the ending, but the story, the violence, the visuals, and the drama made this main event something that people still talk about today. Number 49, The Undertaker vs Vader vs Steve Austin vs Bret Hart from In Your House Final 4. In early 1997, WWE had a problem. Shawn Michaels had suddenly lost his smile and handed back the WWF title, which meant the WrestleMania plans had to be ripped up and rewritten. The solution was a four-way match at In Your House Final 4. Funnily enough, featuring the last two men standing from that year's Royal Rumble, Bret Hart and Steve Austin, as well as The Undertaker and Vader. Not a bad lineup for a quick fix. The match had some funky rules, however. You could be eliminated by pinfall submission or even a Rumble-style over-the-top rope elimination. This meant that every time somebody stumbled near the ropes, fans gasped like they were watching their drunk uncle at a wedding. Plus, it was no disqualification as well, so weapons were totally fair game. Just don't go over the top rope to get them or you'd eliminate yourself, you dafty. The chaos delivered. Vader took a steel step right to the eye and gushed blood like he was in a Tarantino film. Austin and Bret continued their rivalry, brawling every chance they got, while Undertaker loomed like a final boss who might snatch the vacant title away at any second. For fans starved of excitement in the mid-90s, this match felt like a feast after years of TV dinners. Bret won the match, but it didn't last. Sid ended up taking it off him the very next night on Raw. Regardless, Final Four set the table beautifully for WrestleMania 13, with Austin vs. Hart and Taker vs. Sid both getting a strong build. And Vader, busted eyeball and all, looked like an absolute beast. Sometimes chaos is exactly what a company needs. Number 48, Bianca Belair vs. Rhea Ripley vs. Io Sky, WrestleMania 41. On paper, this one got quite a bit of flack by virtue of just being a triple threat when a lot of people wanted a pure singles match. It turns out, they were all dead wrong. Bianca, Rhea and Io clearly got together backstage, pressed play on a WCW Cruiserweight highlight reel and said, hey, let's do that. The result was one of the most electrifying matches of the whole weekend. What made it work was how unpredictable the whole thing felt. This was kinda like WWE does PWG in a way. Rhea and Bianca had been booked as unstoppable forces before, freak athletes who bulldoze through opponents like human cheat codes. But with Io Sky in the mix, suddenly you had an underdog and one of the best wrestlers in the world who could believably swoop in and take the belt. Fans weren't just watching the moves, they were hanging on every near fall as well, because all three felt like they could walk out as champion. And let's not undersell the work rate here either. Big slams, slick counters, Bianca's KOD, Rio's power spot, and Io's Daredevil moonsault that sealed the win. 15 minutes of wall-to-wall action, no wasted motion, no bathroom breaks allowed. Really, it was one of the most incredible spot fests in WWE history. The biggest compliment you can get is probably that Drew McIntyre and Damian Priest had to follow this in a Sin City street fight. That's a big feud, and they couldn't quite come close, but bless them, they never had a chance. Number 47, Chris Jericho vs. Triple H from Fully Loaded 2000. By mid-2000, WWE was all about building new stars. The Rock, Kurt Angle, Chris Benoit, Chris Jericho, fresh names were being tested in big-time spots. At Fully Loaded, Chris Jericho was tossed into a last man standing match with Triple H, and let's just say this was the night the Y2J officially announced, I belong here. The psychology was spot on. Triple H, ever the cerebral assassin, spent much of his time targeting Jericho's ribs, turning every chair shot and suplex into pure agony. Fans rallied behind Jericho, who sold the pain like a champ, but just kept crawling back for more. This wasn't cocky Y2J trading quips, this was a gutsy Jericho, digging deeper than ever before. And the finish? Perfection. Both men barely survived to the final count, with Triple H just managing to stumble up before collapsing once again. The margins were razor thin. Jericho looked every bit the equal of the game, even in defeat. That's how you make a star, without handing them the win. And of course, Stephanie McMahon was there as well, stirring the pot and almost eating a stray sledgehammer. And yes, the crowd gasped at that like they'd just seen a car crash. It all added up to a match that not only delivered the thrills, but also put Jericho firmly on the main event map. Number 46, Shawn Michaels vs. Razor Ramon, SummerSlam 1995. After tearing the house down at WrestleMania 10, Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon knew they had to raise the bar at SummerSlam. This time, however, they didn't rely on just one ladder, they brought in backups, giving the whole match a fresh dynamic and ensuring that no broken prop would derail the drama. The story here was pure evolution. Shawn, now shifting from cocky heel to babyface showstopper, pulled off jaw-dropping risks that made the fans fall in love with him. Razor, the cool-as-ice bad guy, was the perfect foil. Moments like Shawn missing a huge splash or Razor countering with a razor's edge off the ladder had people leaping out of their seats, and credit where it's due, Michael Hayes was on commentary, perfectly selling the torn fan reaction. HBK was suddenly likeable, but Razor had a loyal following as well, making this feel like a truly crowd-split spectacle. Was this match as iconic as their Mania 10 clash? Maybe not. That one was lightning in a bottle. But SummerSlam 95 gave us a worthy sequel and easily one of the best matches of a very patchy wrestling year, especially when the alternative was Diesel versus King Mabel in the main event. Imagine closing a show with that. No thank you. Shawn versus Razor probably should have gone on last. Number 45, the Hart Foundation versus Steve Austin, Legion of Doom, Goldust and Ken Shamrock at In Your House Canadian Stampede. This wasn't just a match, it was a volcanic eruption. In Calgary in July 97, the Hart Foundation, Bret, Owen, Bulldog, Pillman and Jim Neidhart stood tall as hometown heroes. Across the ring you had Steve Austin, Ken Shamrock, Goldust and the Legion of Doom. On paper, that team screams star power, but in Canada, they were booed like they just insulted hockey and maple syrup in a single sentence. The crowd atmosphere was insane and really one of the best in WWE history. Jerry Lawler used to ramble on and on about Bizarro World whenever Canada flipped the script, but this time he was actually spot on. Every punch from the Harts got a standing ovation. Every move from Austin and his team got jeered out of the building. It felt like a sporting event where national pride was on the line, even though, the British Bulldog was kind of British and not really much to do with this. But family ties and all that. The action matched the energy as well. Austin fought like a man possessed, Shamrock legitimately looked scary, and the Hart Foundation played master manipulators. By the end, Bret's team scored the win, and Austin had to be escorted out of the Saddle Dome by security to avoid an actual riot. Canadian Stampede is still hailed as one of the best WWE events ever, and this match is primarily why. It wasn't just about the moves, it was about that molten hot atmosphere. On this night, the Harts weren't just wrestlers. They were national heroes defending their turf. They were gods, and the fans made sure you felt every second of it. Number 44, John Cena versus Daniel Bryan from SummerSlam 2013. By 2013, John Cena was still WWE's Superman, beloved by kids, loathed by half the adults, and constantly serenaded with chants of "You can't wrestle." Enter Daniel Bryan, the bearded underdog technician the fans actually wanted on top. Their showdown at SummerSlam was the moment those two worlds collided, and it delivered in spades. Triple H served as the special referee, and unlike his usual spotlight hogging self, he played it cool, letting the match breathe while adding just the right amount of drama. Cena showed that he could hang with Bryan's technical wizardry, proving once again that he was so much more than a 5-move kind of guy. Meanwhile, Bryan fought with his usual fire, every kick and counter making the crowd believe that his dream was finally happening. And then it did. Bryan pinned Cena clean in the middle of the ring. No shenanigans, no excuses. For one shining moment, Daniel Bryan stood tall as WWE Champion, confetti-worthy celebration and all. Of course, this is WWE in the 2010s, so the feel-good moment just couldn't last. Randy Orton cashed in his Money in the Bank briefcase, Triple H betrayed Bryan, and the Authority storyline was born. People were raging. But looking back, that gut punch ending actually ended up enhancing Bryan's eventual triumph at WrestleMania 30, as plowing through the mud once more made the triumph even sweeter. Number 43, Shawn Michaels vs Triple H, SummerSlam 2002. Shawn Michaels returning at SummerSlam 2002 felt like a miracle. 4 years earlier, he'd been forced into retirement with a back injury that sounded permanent. But here he was, lacing up the boots again against his old buddy turned enemy Triple H. WWE billed it as an unsanctioned street fight, basically a way for them to say, if Shawn gets hurt in this, please don't sue us. The match itself was incredible. Michaels didn't just look good, he looked like he hadn't missed a step. Flying elbows, vintage bumps, dramatic selling, the whole HBK arsenal was back in play, and fans were eating it up, cheering their lungs out for the comeback king. Triple H deserves a lot of credit for this one too. He worked the match perfectly, targeting Shawn's back and forcing HBK to sell like his career really was on the line. The emotional roller coaster was off the charts. Every time Shawn got up, the crowd got louder. And then the finish. Michaels pulled off the upset win, only for Triple H to immediately smash him with his sledgehammer in the post-match. It was, up to that point, one of the best performances of Hunter's career, protecting his own aura while giving Shawn the ultimate feel-good moment. In the end, this wasn't just a good match, it was a miracle. Michaels proved that he could still go, and he'd go on to wrestle for another 8 years at a very high level. SummerSlam 2002 wasn't just a comeback, it was the beginning of a second career. Number 42, Bret Hart vs. Owen Hart, SummerSlam 1994. At SummerSlam 94, the brothers Hart went to war once again, this time locked inside one of those old school blue bar steel cages that looked like it hurt a heck of a lot more than the nice fluffy shiny modern equivalents. The story was classic Hart family, logical, patient and perfectly executed. Owen was the bratty little brother and he played that role to perfection, constantly trying to prove that he was better. Bret, the seasoned technician, fought smart, grinding down Owen's offense until the finish came. Owen's leg got caught in the cage, allowing Bret to climb out and over for the win. Simple, effective, and brilliant. What made this special was the psychology. It wasn't just about cheap thrills or huge bumps. It was about telling a story where every escape attempt mattered, every counter had weight, and every fan was hanging on to see which brother would walk out the door first. Owen even managed to make the people almost feel sorry for him by the end. Almost. The match went over 30 minutes, much to the chagrin of The Undertaker, seeing as it cut into his dreadful Underfaker main event. Honestly, Bret and Owen did everybody a favour. Nobody needed any more of that nonsense anyway. This would have been the final pay-per-view clash between the two brothers, and what a way to go out. A cage classic that still holds up today, and a reminder that when it came to in-ring storytelling, Bret and Owen were borderline untouchable. Number 41, Ric Flair vs. Randy Savage, WrestleMania 8. Few storylines have pushed Randy Savage's buttons like Ric Flair saying that Elizabeth was his first and the mind games heading into WrestleMania 8. Flair was backed by Mr. Perfect and Bobby Heenan, even rolling out doctored photos of himself with Miss Elizabeth, which in 1992 was enough to make the audience faint with rage. When Savage finally got his hands on Flair, it wasn't going to be a clean scientific match. This was personal, and despite Vince McMahon's ban on blood at the time, both men went rogue and added a little colour to the bout. Translation, they bladed, bled, and got fined for it. Bret Hart and Roddy Piper had already done the same earlier in the night and somehow gotten away with it, so naturally Randy and Rick were the ones who got punished. Go figure. The match itself was everything you could possibly want from these two. Savage was fiery and unhinged, fighting like a man defending his wife's honour. Flair was smug and vicious, playing the dirtiest heel in the business, and together they stole the show. Hogan and Sid may have been the main event, but everybody knew this was the real headlining match. Savage won the WWF title, Flair lost some money in fines, and the fans walked away buzzing. Sometimes breaking the rules really does make for the better story. Gareth Morgan, I'm tagging you in.
Thank you, Mighty Murray. Now it's time for me to get my stuff in and super kick the hell out of this midsection. Speaking of which, number 40, Shawn Michaels vs. Mankind, In Your House Mind Games. If anyone needs a reminder of just how quirky the In Your House series really was, then consider this. Mankind challenging Shawn Michaels for the WWF title at In Your House Mind Games wasn't the final match that fans in attendance for the card saw. A trio of dark matches followed it once the pay-per-view portion had ended, those being Farouk vs. Mark Mero, Psycho Sid vs. Vader, and Triple H vs. Jake Roberts. Wild stuff. Obviously, none of them could follow on from an inspired Michaels fending off the brutality of Mick Foley's alter ego. Memorable spots include Mankind stabbing his own leg furiously on the ring apron. This was provocative and like nothing that Federation fans had ever seen before. But it was Foley's unique way of trying to regain feeling in his limb after Shawn had meticulously targeted it. It was a lovely bit of psychology from Michaels to work the leg, and even better strung out behavior from good old Mick. Foley still regards this as one of his better matches, and no wonder. Shawn should have been proud of it too. He was feeling the pressure as the WWF poster boy by September 1996. and had just come off an unfulfilling feud with Vader that only worsened his fragile mental state. Ironically, considering the gimmick's own psyche, it was Mankind who handed HBK a title match worth savouring. Now, purists will scoff at a disqualification finish being ranked so high in this collection, but the preceding 26 minutes and change had been so much damn fun. Foley proved that he could hang at a tippy-top level in the WWF, and Shawn finally looked like a champion and sexy boy who had an edge to him. Number 39, Bret Hart vs. Mr. Perfect, King of the Ring, 1993. Jim Ross surely thought that he'd hit the jackpot at King of the Ring 1993 when Bret Hart and Mr. Perfect entered the ring for their titular tournament semi-final. Both had already worked matches that night, Hart vs. Razor Ramon in the opener, and Perfect vs. Mr. Hughes. But those were mere appetizers for the glory to come. Spoiler alert here, Hart and Curt Hennig didn't beat what they'd done a few years prior at SummerSlam 1991, but the fact they even ran it close says everything about their talent. Perfect's back, which had been screaming in 91, was even more shot to bits by 93. Learning to work around physical limitations had been his primary goal in the years since. But still, this could easily have been a literally painful reminder that he wasn't quite the performer he'd been before. A jocular promo exchange before the match backstage hinted that these good pals knew what was up for grabs. Win King of the Ring and they would be deemed the best wrestler in the company. That believably meant something to workhorses like Bret and Perfect. They just had to be number one. And they had to get there through toil and by showing grit. Hart's injured fingers would become a theme for the entire show, and that injury prevented him from locking on the sharpshooter to win any of his matches, thus demanding he come up with creative ways to get the job done. Perfect understood the assignment too, and increasingly wore a ticked-off scowl when he couldn't put Bret away and advance to the final. It was stunning, this. Simply stunning. These two were some of the greatest technical performers of all time, but I want to know who is your favourite technical worker and what was their best match in your opinion? Let me know down below in the comments. Number 38, Kurt Angle vs. Chris Benoit, Royal Rumble 2003. In many respects, both Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit were like throwbacks to the days of the previously mentioned Bret Hart, Curt Hennig, Shawn Michaels, and other super workers expected to deliver superiority between the ropes. There was no guarantee that they'd mesh well as opponents, though. I mean, nobody really knows if a combination will work for sure until the bell rings. We've seen it backfire a few times over the years, haven't we? Thankfully, Angle and Benoit got plenty of practice throughout 2000, 2001, and 2002. And they were a duo that the WWF/WWE top brass kept coming back to time and time again. Admittedly, the results varied. For example, a 2 out of 3 falls scrap at Judgment Day 2001 worked, but a stuffy ultimate submission affair at Backlash 1 month beforehand fell a bit flat. WWE's decision makers were willing to bank on the combination coming through for the top prize at the 2003 Royal Rumble anyway, and that proved to be a shrewd bit of booking too. Kurt's proteges, Shelton Benjamin and Charlie Haas, were ejected from ringside right before the bell sounded, which let both technicians just get on with the good stuff without distractions. They worked 20 grueling minutes of stiff, uncompromising, and delicious wrestling. There were oodles of nimble reversals and holds throughout, and Kurt's super slam off the ropes looked thunderous. Angle might have retained his WWE title and chilled out with an ice-cold glass of milk to watch the Rumble take place afterwards, but Benoit received a standing ovation from an appreciative live crowd in Boston. Everybody knew that they'd witnessed something special here, and they were grateful to these guys for removing the stench of Triple H's unflattering world title defense versus Scott Steiner from the air too. It's obviously been tainted a little by the horrific real-life events that eventually followed, but it was a terrific match. Number 37, Bianca Belair vs. Sasha Banks, WrestleMania 37. WrestleMania 37's Night 1 main event was not the first time that women had main evented the biggest weekend of the year, but it remains the finest female headliner on the show of shows to date. Both Sasha Banks and the emerging Bianca Belair had pressure on their shoulders too. WWE's build-up hadn't been all that great. The pair were cast as unlikely partners, which felt forced, and that did nothing to sell the intensity of their match. But like top performers do, Sasha and Bianca managed to overcome all of that to produce a bout worthy of top billing. Not even Michael Cole's botched commentary call at the finish could spoil it. Besides, the way that Banks used Belair's own hair braid to her advantage throughout the bout was killer. And it's a reminder of just how good Sasha could be on her day during that WWE run. The legit boss used the braid during a submission hold to add further talk, but then got her comeuppance towards the end when Belair whipped her with it. Yow! That played before a satisfying crack sound, and a lot of oohing and ahhing from the live crowd. That is something worth mentioning too. Mania 37 had limited numbers back then live, which was welcome after 36's weird, albeit unavoidable, silence. Yep, that was an odd Mania. Those lucky few in attendance basked in a terrific showdown between women who managed to survive that wonky build. Going with the EST as winner was a shrewd decision too, because she was the rising star at the time and needed the victory a lot more than Sasha. What a moment this was. It brought a tear to my eye in a dark time. Number 36, Chris Jericho vs. Chris Benoit, Royal Rumble 2001. It's hard to pick a greatest spot from this Intercontinental title ladder classic at the 2001 Royal Rumble. Chris Jericho and Chris Benoit were well matched as rivals, because each brought something different to the party, whilst also fully understanding how to complement the other man's skills. For example, Jericho's submissions meant that he could fit into Benoit's technical style, and the latter's willingness to take big bumps was ideal for bringing the best out in Y2J. Now back to those spots. A memorable steel chair shot when Benoit was mid-dive to the outside of the ring got people talking. And so did Jericho locking on a version of his trademark Walls of Jericho finish atop the ladder itself. That looked unbelievably painful. There was surely no way for these guys to work that, not with the point of the ladder pressed right into Benoit's back. Yeesh. Only matches like Triple H versus Kurt Angle and the 30-man Rumble itself could have hoped to follow this stormer of a match. Chyna and Ivory in the women's title slot had no chance really, so it's just as well that they were put on the card to bring everyone down after Jericho and Benoit ripped the roof off New Orleans Arena. Of course, and this is worth repeating, some folks just cannot watch Benoit matches the same way anymore. And yeah, fair enough. But this IC title beast certainly has a place on any list looking at the greatest WWE matches ever. It brought prestige to the workhorse title yet again, and showed that both were more than ready for bigger things atop the card. Number 35, Gunther vs. Drew McIntyre vs. Sheamus, WrestleMania 39. This WrestleMania 39 three-way was advertised plainly heading in. WWE pretty much told fans that it'd be three big burly blokes chucking one another around and hitting enough power moves to make an old-school Silver Vision montage maker happy. They went right after it from the opening bell, and even Titus O'Neil, who was sitting in on guest commentary, added to the flair by reacting like a kid at Christmas. Exchanges between all three workers were so snug and convincing that fans lost their minds at practically everything. That included Sheamus going for a whopping 30 pounding blows on McIntyre's chest. He stopped at 29, but only because Drew collapsed in agony at what had just happened. Something as simple as that got a pop out of the crowd, which really does go to show what audiences covet. They want stiff, uncompromising ring work, and they want it from wrestlers they actually care about. Gunther retained his Intercontinental prize by powerbombing Sheamus onto McIntyre, then picking Drew right back up for another round. He looked utterly dominant as champion here, but crucially knew when to lay out and make his foes look like a proper threat to the title too. Simply put, this will go down in history as one of the greatest triple threats ever. Number 34, Triple H vs. The Undertaker, WrestleMania 28. WWE billed this Hell in a Cell encounter as the end of an era. It was supposed to be complete closure on the Attitude Boom, but there was next to no chance that the company would stop talking about one of their most critically lauded periods. And I mean, why should they? It was a hell of a time. However, everyone tuning in went along for the last ride between Triple H and The Undertaker, and WWE execs had the sense to include Shawn Michaels as a special guest ref and Jim Ross on commentary. Both helped hugely because they added so much credibility to the spectacle without ever threatening to chip any of the focus away from Tripp striving to end Taker's legendary Mania winning streak. That'd still be intact for a few years yet, so WWE heaped on the drama by alleging that Hunter would never get another shot at proving his worth versus the dead man. Some of the near falls in this one were agonizingly close, so much so that the big crowd in Miami were tricked and seduced by the thought that D-Generation X-Pals, Trips, and HBK would screw Undertaker over in the end. That just had to happen, right? Wrong. Nope, Taker survived until getting his undead balls booted black and blue by Brock Lesnar in 2014. And all three men posed on the ramp with a sense of finality. They had completed the Attitude Era. This bout easily could have headlined the entire show, to be honest. Nothing else, including Chris Jericho versus CM Punk or The Rock versus John Cena, could come close to topping it. Triple H couldn't quite better what Michaels achieved with Undertaker, but he came eerily close. Speaking of those two, number 33, The Undertaker vs. Shawn Michaels, Bad Blood 1997. Nobody quite knew what to expect from Hell in a Cell when the gimmick match took its first bow at In Your House Bad Blood in October 1997. On paper, it just seemed like this would be a standard steel cage match with a roof overhead. No escapes possible. The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels would have to beat the other man senseless to win. The result was a match so powerful it became the last WWF/WWE clash given 5 stars by Dave Meltzer's Wrestling Observer until John Cena vs. CM Punk at Money in the Bank 2011. A WWE Cell War didn't get the 5-star treatment again until Cody Rhodes vs. Seth Rollins in 2022 for the record. Hell, even Mankind vs. Taker failed to top it on Meltzer's bespoke scale. Anyone worried that this would be a confined, possibly even dull brawl inside the structure would have been giddy when a kayfabe cameraman injury forced the door open. That let both wrestlers fight out of the cell, and it led to Shawn's memorable bump through the Spanish announce table. Kane's debut was another highlight. He ripped the door off its hinges, which had been locked again, stuck his storyline bro with a tombstone piledriver, then Michaels pinned Taker to score the unlikely win. 2 legends were born that night, Kane and the Hell in a Cell match itself. People wanted more, much more, and well, they get it. Number 32, Steve Austin vs. Triple H, No Way Out 2001. There have only been a handful of 3 stages of Hell matches in WWE history. Ones following on from this? Well, Triple H vs. Shawn Michaels in 2002, Randy Orton vs. Trips in 2009, John Cena vs. Ryback in 2013, and Johnny Gargano vs. Adam Cole, baby, in 2019. The exhausting 3-in-1 match type hasn't been a popular choice over the decades, perhaps because not many fancy tackling it. Triple H has worked a trio of them in his time, but the best was definitely the first. He and mortal enemy Steve Austin clashed at No Way Out 2001 in a standard wrestling match, a street fight, and inside a steel cage. It was hypercharged nightmare fuel for any fans with weak stomachs, because blood was hardly in short supply for Hunter and Stone Cold in February 01. It's a wonder they had any left to power through matches at WrestleMania X7. Seriously though, what a battle. Now some might suggest that it'd mean more historically had the pair not become 2-man power trip partners following Austin's unpredictable heel turn at Mania a few months later, but the bout is still some watch in isolation. It was inarguably also Steve's best match since returning from a serious injury the prior October. That period between the 2001 Royal Rumble and Mania X7 remains some of the best week-by-week content that WWE ever produced for its fanbase. The roster was on fire, and top-liners like The Game and Austin were thundering through some gritty, intense matches like they were second nature. Must-see stuff. The best 3 stages yet. But who would you like to see in another in the future? Comment below, my friends. Number 31, Triple H versus Shawn Michaels versus Chris Benoit, WrestleMania 20. It'll forever be a pity that the magnificent "we made it" moment between Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit has been soured. Confetti rained down on both workhorses as they hugged inside Madison Square Garden as WWE Champion and World Heavyweight Champion respectively. And it seemed like a fresh era of hard work over sports entertainment sizzle on Raw and SmackDown had dawned. The tragically grim ending to Benoit's story destroyed that Mania 20 closure for many, including myself. If one is strictly analysing the quality of pro wrestling on display during Benoit's match versus Triple H and Shawn Michaels though, then it fully deserves a spot on this list. It was right up there with the greatest matches in Mania history. There's a weird retro flavour to WrestleMania 20 overall. Watch it back now and you will marvel at just how nostalgic everything is. At times, the pre-HD camera work and WWE honouring the past makes it look like something from the late 1980s or early 90s. Brief double-team efforts from DX buddies Hunter and Shawn added to the feeling that Benoit would have to win against the odds. His submission victory marked the first time such a finish had closed Mania 2, which only made things even more exceptional. This was an in-ring belter from start to finish, and it's amazing the trio retooled their efforts for another triple threat at Backlash the very next month. Watch that one too if you're in the mood or can stomach a marathon session of Benoit bouts. Right, I'm dropping the title to the legendary Sai now for 30 to 21. Take it away!
Thanks, Gareth. Let's keep this thing going with number 30, Bret Hart versus Roddy Piper at WrestleMania 8. This is the match Bret lifted from for his Survivor Series 1996 grudge bout versus Steve Austin. It's also the one that he and Roddy Piper deftly sidestepped respective fines for despite using blood when that was a strict no-no. It'd be a lie to say that Piper was capable of keeping up with the quickening pace of WWF workhorses like Hart or Shawn Michaels full-time by 1992. He'd visibly slowed down and had at times lost interest in wrestling a full-time schedule entirely. However, on his best day, Hot Rod could produce some sparkling matches that turned the clock back to his dynamic NWA days. WrestleMania 8 was one such occasion. Roddy was inspired by the thought of tangling with real-life buddy Bret, and there was just enough tension between them to turn this from happy-go-lucky babyface battle to tense game of one-upmanship over the Intercontinental title. His short run with the belt would mark Piper's only singles title reign in the company, which is frankly astonishing considering his lofty status as one of the true greats. But he could be proud of this one. Frankly, it's probably Roddy's best Mania showing yet, and it was also another sure sign that Bret belonged at the top of the mountain. Number 29, Randy Orton versus Mick Foley at Backlash 2004. There's a reason this is still one of Mick Foley's favourite matches from a rich and often bloody career. He was determined to help elevate young rising star Randy Orton up a notch in the eyes of WWE fans during the early knockings of 2004. And yes, selfishly, Mick was also looking to prove that he could still put on special hardcore bouts filled with weapons, blood, barbed wire, thumbtacks, and all of that good stuff. And considering his history with these kinds of matches, well, hopes were high for this IC title clash at Backlash. And it was everything that Foley, Orton, WWE management and fans hoped it would be going into it. One memorable spot was Mick placing a barbed wire bat between Randy's legs and leg dropping his full weight onto Randy's sensitive areas. But Randy's big set-piece bump onto hundreds if not thousands of glittering spiky tacks also got a huge reaction from fans in Canada. This was a true coming-of-age match for Orton ahead of his sudden World Heavyweight title win later in the same year, and he really earned his stripes against a true legend here. Furthermore, this is precisely the kind of hardcore war countless fans missed during WWE's PG days. And more than just gratuitous violence, it also had a great story of an arrogant young buck dismissing someone who had paved the way ahead for him. Number 28, The Undertaker vs CM Punk WrestleMania 29. Very excited to talk about this one of my favourite matches of all time. Now, WWE would have you believe that this is one of the triple main event matches alongside Triple H vs Brock and Rock and John Cena too, but CM Punk didn't actually headline WrestleMania until 2025. Make no mistake about it, this was simply an undercard bout, but it was more than just an undercard bout. Keep in mind, of course, that Taker's iconic Mania winning streak was still going strong in 2013, at least for another year, so there were thoughts that Punk could be the one handpicked to end it. After all, some controversial pre-match amble saw Punk interrupt Taker's tribute to his fallen manager and friend Paul Bearer. Like many of CM Punk's feuds for the era, it really melded reality with kayfabe, and frankly pissed a lot of people off. This match is understandably considered one of the last truly excellent matches The Undertaker was ever involved in. And what's more, Punk's rebellious swagger and the lure of the streak being broken sucked everyone in. Number 27, Jeff Hardy vs CM Punk, SummerSlam 2009. Speaking of CM Punk blending splashes of reality into storyline goodness, in 2009 the straight-edge saviour pointed to Jeff Hardy's substance abuse issues like they were a giant neon WrestleMania sign. WWE's version of events included Punk alleging that he was simply better or sharper than Jeff ever could be because he was squeaky clean. On commentary, announcers claimed that CM couldn't hope to hang with Jeff in a TLC match. After all, Hardy had carved out a name for himself in the history books by taking death-defying risks aplenty in tag action since 1999, so he was a dead cert to retain the World Heavyweight Championship, even if he crashed through tables and leaped off ladders and got hit with chairs. Or not, as the case may be. Despite their very real personal problems with each other individually, Punk and Jeff put on a stunning show rife with all the big spots people had come to know and love from TLC bouts. But rather shockingly, it was CM Punk who scored the win and the title by hauling down the gold after knocking Hardy off the ladder. Mid-celebration, Punk was interrupted by Taker and one hell of a chokeslam, but even with this setting up the next feud, fans weren't quick to forget what Punk and Jeff had done at SummerSlam 2009. Number 26, Roman Reigns vs Cody Rhodes, WrestleMania 40. Disappointment was clinging to the oxygen inside SoFi Stadium when Cody Rhodes just came up short against Bloodline overseer Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 39. Lots of people were understandably miffed at Triple H, believing he'd screwed the pooch here by avoiding a happy ending, but maybe it was all worth it to do it 1 year later. And WrestleMania 40 was the perfect place to do it because it was blockbuster sports entertainment overload. Everyone from the Usos, Solo Sikoa and Seth Rollins to John Cena, The Rock and even Taker, who subbed in for Stone Cold, who didn't like the asking price, invaded the ring as WWE mixed the current product with some attitude and ruthless aggression era greatest hits. There were enough bells and whistles in Philly to last a lifetime, but Cody cut through all of the outside noise to finally bag the WWE title. Countless happy faces hit the ring to celebrate alongside him, and it was a true WrestleMania moment. One for the ages and a reminder that sometimes it's best to wait for a happy ending rather than pull the trigger too early. Number 25, Edge vs John Cena, Unforgiven 2006. If nothing else, Unforgiven 2006 should be remembered for its frankly gratuitous poster of John Cena with the word Unforgiven scratched into his body. It's insane. But handily, the main event is also worth remembering. Cena toppled Edge to become the brand new WWE Champion, his third reign at the time, and it would kick off a run that would last a whopping 380 days before injuries forced him to relinquish it. The company front-loaded the bout with stipulations, so it was not only a TLC match, but Super Cena would have to switch brands from Raw to SmackDown if he lost as well. Additional credit must go to Lita as well, by the way. She was stalking ringside to support her man Edge, and one of her spots led to maximum drama. Lita smashed Cena in the back with a steel chair while the Rated R superstar was climbing the ladder, which accidentally sent John tumbling into the prop and Edge through a table. And also Cena hit her with an FU, so that was fun. The drama in this one was thick, the star power was fierce, and the action was frankly satisfying. A true pay-per-view classic that's rarely given the respect that it deserves. Number 24, AJ Styles vs John Cena at Royal Rumble 2017. Hardcore TNA fans might have been rather chuffed to see Impact original AJ Styles sign a fat contract with WWE in 2016, but there were of course worries that Vince wouldn't know how to make the most of his skills. As we all know now, those concerns faded following a hot Royal Rumble debut and some brilliant matches against Kevin Owens, Roman Reigns, John Cena, and so on. Squaring off with Cena at Money in the Bank and SummerSlam had been tremendous, but Styles and the then poster boy saved their best for Royal Rumble 2017. By this point, AJ had beaten Cena twice in a row on pay-per-view, so revenge was on the cards for John in San Antonio. There was also the not-so-small matter of Cena potentially winning his 16th world title and tying Ric Flair's recognised belt haul. But the bookers made sure that Styles didn't go down without a fight. He took not one, not two, not three, but 4 attitude adjustment finishers before staring up at the lights. The pair's tight 24-minute match proved once and for all that AJ Styles belonged in the upper echelons of the WWE main event scene. If there was ever a way to prove that, it's squeeze out 3 brilliant matches against John Cena in the later stages of his career. Number 23, Steve Austin vs Dude Love at Over the Edge 1998. Some people would have you believe that this match would have been even better had Mick Foley gone under his Mankind or Cactus Jack gimmicks. And sure, I can see that perspective, but Mick's goofier Dude Love character fit the story told on TV so well. He wanted to impress Vinyl boss Vince McMahon by getting his teeth done, wearing a fancy blazer and generally trying to show that he could be a corporate champion who was nothing like the outlaw rebel Steve Austin. McMahon stacked the deck against Stone Cold by installing himself as special guest referee, as well as putting Stooges Pat Patterson and Gerald Briscoe in other important roles. And they were taken out from an interruption by The Undertaker. It's a Stone Cold match, and the best Stone Cold matches have Jim Ross on commentary, and he was at his all-time best here. Memorable moments include yelling look out," as Taker went to town on Patterson and Briscoe, and of course calling Austin the toughest SOB I ever saw to overcome this during the celebration. This should definitely go down as the best defense from Austin's first WWF title reign between March and June of '98. Foley had shown himself to be a sterling opponent for the Fed's top stars yet again, and he had simply breathtaking chemistry with Steve that peaked at Over the Edge. Number 22, Shawn Michaels vs John Cena, Raw, 23rd of April 2007. What a wonderful coincidence it is that I get to read this one because I was in attendance for this match. And yes, all of us piling into Earl's Court in London basically had to pinch ourselves at the prospect of seeing a WrestleMania 23 rematch live in person between a re-energized icon Shawn Michaels and top WWE breakout star John Cena in 2007. And unbelievably, the two were allowed to go for 56 minutes in one of the best WWE TV matches ever. Look, scrap that, it's one of the best WWE matches, period. And I'm not just biased, I promise. If nothing else, because my seat was on the floor, so I really couldn't see most of this match until I watched it back on TV. Speaking of TV, the advertisement breaks did threaten to ruin the flow of what Shawn and John were doing, but they showed superior skills to overcome that and turn this into a true gem that was frankly unmissable. By the end of the thing, both guys were struggling to even punch or kick one another properly. It was totally deliberate, by the way. They just wanted to sell how knackered they truly were. And the announcers did a bang-up job of putting across the idea of a stalemate. Then, just as if it looked like they'd genuinely wrestle forever, Michaels biffed Cena with another sweet chin music to take home the win. There are some people that feel like John Cena can't wrestle, and I completely understand that, but then there's this, which completely goes against that idea. Hanging with one of the greats for almost a full hour wasn't something that anybody in the business could do back in 2007, and Cena made it look so easy. Number 21, Triple H vs The Rock at Backlash 2000. There was palpable excitement heading into Backlash 2000 due to Steve Austin's impending return to action. Fed fans hadn't seen much of Stone Cold since an infamous angle at Survivor Series and serious neck surgery took him out of action. So there was magic in the air knowing that Austin would turn up at some stage during The Rock vs Triple H in the main event. Rocky and Hunter had shown their chemistry back at SummerSlam 98, but they take things to another level in the year 2000. Judgment Day had the hour-long Iron Man stipulation and The Undertaker's comeback as a biker, but Backlash was their best match by a mile. Austin's involvement and Linda McMahon bringing back referee Elle Hebner, who had been kayfabe fired by members of her family recently, blew the ceiling off of Washington's MCI Center. This was the company doing what it did best at that time, stacking drama on top of drama. But more than that, Rock and Triple H punctuated their match with several strong sequences that didn't rely on all of the ringside distractions. It really says everything for the strength of this duo that their showing would have been absolutely fine even if the other stuff hadn't happened at all. But to be fair, Stone Cold towing the wrecked DX Express bus was the cherry on top of everything. I'm going to go and rest my voice now. Enjoy the rest of the video. I'm going to pass this over to Simon Miller.
Thank you once again, Sai, and I get to talk about WrestleMania 12, which will be absolutely controversial, because it is Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels. So yes, this one draws a line right down the middle of everybody, because it is the now infamous Iron Man match. Now, I do not think it is the greatest wrestling match ever, although there will be others who pop up and say, actually, I think this is brilliant, and more power to you. It definitely has a big negative in the sense within 60 minutes you do not get any falls. That kind of took the Iron Man stipulation match and downgraded it a little bit. I mean, the whole fun of those things is you go, oh my gosh, we've seen so many submissions and 1, 2, 3s, who the flub is going to win? Now, of course, Bret and Shawn did this because they wanted to be different. I think that's one of the reasons why it stood the test of time. The whole thing is about risk. I mean, even doing an Iron Man match for the main event at WrestleMania 12 seemed totally crazy, but they had such faith in each other's abilities they thought they could pull it off, and I think mostly they did. The ending is absolutely excellent as well because the timer does run out with Shawn Michaels in the sharpshooter, so if you wanted to hazard a guess that HBK was about to tap out or submit, you absolutely could. Gorilla Monsoon, the on-screen president, then demands we go into sudden death, and what happens? A flustered Hart gets kicked right in the face with sweet chin music, he gets pinned, the boyhood dream had come true for Shawn Michaels. And look, that line was used on video packages for years after the fact. It's pretty damn iconic. I actually think this match would be far more enjoyable today if it did have more falls, but the fact that it didn't opens the door up for more conversation, which arguably makes it more interesting. But that may have absolutely been gibberish, I do not know. I think one of the reasons I do like it so much is because the loss for Bret would have him spiral towards his eventual 1997 heel turn, as he talked about being screwed, including in the WrestleMania 12 Iron Man match. So it's a piece of WWE history and went down at a WrestleMania. I do think it always needs to be high up in the list because it just creates a talking point. Now make sure you let me know your thoughts in the comments, because I bet it separates everybody again. Number 19, Edge and Christian versus the Dudley Boys versus the Hardy Boys at SummerSlam 2000. So it is really hard to leave off matches like Edge and Christian versus the Hardy Boys from No Mercy 1999, or the pair's combined ladder match with the Dudley Boys from WrestleMania 2000. The simple fact of the matter though is that SummerSlam 2000's original TLC Classic was just better than both of them, and it was both historically more significant and more fluid in execution. There's a reason I have mentioned all of those bouts though, because I think they all come as one big package. If you're going to watch one, you should watch all of them. They're all damn great. In terms of what Edge, Christian, Matt, Jeff, Bubba Ray, and Devon did do at the hottest event of the summer in 2000, though, is basically redefine everything that had come before and revolutionize what we would expect from ladders until this day. People are still trying to outdo them. It was also a genius move to combine the already idolized ladder gimmick with 2 other tropes, that being chairs and tables, because all of this had become cherished on WWF programming. And this pay-per-view, all 6 guys took some hellacious risks as well, and as Adam Copeland would say years later, it most definitely shortened their careers. Some of the stacked table bumps felt like new ground when the likes of Bubba Ray and Matt crashed through them, and even Lita got involved, and as ever, she would add to all of this rather than take away from it. You also have to hear Jim Ross's sell job on commentary. He is acting like they're all about to die. Better yet, because they were such skilled workers, or maybe it was just by accident, they actually left room for improvement, which meant you were desperate to see the next one. Jeff Hardy also doesn't have one of his dangling spots here, which everybody forgets about. Only because something else would top it, and we'll talk about that later. But yeah, the original TLC set the new bar for big bumps and death-defying stunts. It really is an amazing car crash. Number 18, Chris Jericho versus Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 19. So we've already talked about how good these two were together, and if you want to say this is their best match, I'm not going to argue with you. It was an expertly told master versus student tale, and it went down at WrestleMania. This was also a proper dream come true for Jericho, who had always said that Shawn Michaels was the opponent he wanted to face on the grandest stage. And I guess when he first joined the WWF, he thought this wasn't going to happen because Shawn Michaels had retired before he did return in 2002. Maybe that's why Chris went out of his way to ensure this was going to be everything everybody wanted and more. And Michaels' ability to sell here and act like Chris Jericho was going to murder him, well, it may very well be unrivaled. Sometimes people like to say that Michaels just flippy bumps and no selling. It's absolute baloney. Of course, this was a different version of Chris Jericho as well, but what happened after the damn thing? Christopher smacked Shawn Michaels right in the balls and basically started a heel turn that would continue on the next time he faced Shawn Michaels too. What an absolute sore loser. Fans in attendance were also dumbfounded by this because they had been tricked by the show of respect that happened after this, and even though Shawn Michaels won, it didn't take anything away from Chris Jericho because his performance had just been too damn good. This bout is an absolute stunner and one you have to watch today. There's a reason people talk about them like they are the GOATs, because they went out there and had GOAT matches. Number 17, Shawn Michaels vs. The Undertaker at WrestleMania 26. So there is probably no right or wrong answer when choosing between the back-to-back WrestleMania epics put on by these guys, but once again, that's why you should watch them like the original movie and the sequel, and then you can go argue with Reddit. That's just what we do. Never forget, though, that comparison is the thief of joy, so you should just have as much fun with these as you can, and rest assured that both bouts are on this list. You don't need to get mad. I think really it just speaks volumes about how much chemistry they did have together and how great these performances were, because who else could go out there in back-to-back years and basically have two of the best WrestleMania matches of all time? This one, of course, has extra emotion to it because it is Shawn's retirement match. We do not talk about the Saudi Arabia one in 2018. And the story leading up to this was absolutely fantastic. Shawn was so damn mad that he wasn't able to end the Undertaker's winning streak that he goaded the dead man into another bout. It's why you should watch the 2010 Royal Rumble as well. The Heartbreak Kid only enters that thing because he wants to face the Undertaker for his World Heavyweight Championship, and when Batista knocks him to the floor, my gosh, you will cry into your Tootsie Toes. I think most people as well knew that Michaels wasn't going to win this one as he was walking off into the sunset, but when the Undertaker does drop him on the head to go 18-0, well, you can't help it, you just feel every single emotion possible. This time it was on Shawn's terms though, unlike when he did go away in 1998. And yeah, you can still watch this today, and it feels damn special. Also, if you are an upcoming wrestler, you should probably just steal all of their spots, or at least their facial expressions. They really did produce something special. Number 16, the 1992 Royal Rumble match. Royal Rumbles are usually dramatic, action-packed and brimming with top moments, but they're rarely considered great matches overall. I think most people would sit down and make the argument for most of them, until you get to the 1992 version, which is still widely considered as the greatest Rumble of all time. I mean, it's a prime example of just how outstanding the match type can be if you do book it consistently and with care. I'm not saying that's easy either, which is why this deserves even more praise, because you have to make sure you have something for every single one of the entrants, and that is 30 damn people. With the 1992 version, though, they struck the perfect balance between oodles of star power, and yes, making sure that everybody involved mattered. If you want to be a massive nerd as well, you can compare and contrast this with the 1993 Rumble. I tell you, it's night and day. That one kind of sucks. Bobby Heenan deserves a shout out as well, because my word does he put a shift in, and when the Nature Boy does come up as the victor, well, he basically dies inside because he's so damn happy. Also, don't forget that Flair goes all the way from the number 3 slot to win, and it did surprise people. That was the WCW guy. There was also a bunch of subplots, though, to ensure that Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage had something to talk after it too, and in terms of dream stuff, well, Ric Flair had just won himself the WWF title. If you had told anybody that year beforehand, they would have fallen down. So it just means as well that today when we do talk about it, the 1992 Rumble is historic and significant, and that's why it's this high, damn it. It's really flubbing good. Number 15, The Rock vs. Hollywood Hogan from WrestleMania 18. So several esteemed wrestlers over the years have called Hulk Hogan vs. The Rock from WrestleMania 18 as the best wrestling match of all time. Their argument, of course, does not hinge on spots, moves, or technical brilliance, but the fact they whipped the crowd up into such a frenzy that they deserve all the plaudits. Because at the end of the day, wrestling is for the fans, and if you could have them make this kind of noise, well, you must have done something right. It's all about atmosphere and execution. People around the globe are already super pumped because it was icon versus icon. This kind of goes back to the 92 Rumble. Nobody thought we were going to get Hogan versus Rocky at WrestleMania. Now all our dreams were coming true. I think everybody involved knew this was going to happen as well, because just go watch the standoff between those two behemoths. They look at each other for around about 52 years. There's also the wonderful caveat that the Canadian crowd have decided we haven't seen Hulk Hogan in about a decade, so we are just going to shower him with praise. I mean, you can actually see him get outright emotional. The Rock is super smart as well, because when he picks up on this, he just goes instant heel. He even goes back to the dirty kicks. And it didn't even matter that Hulk Hogan wasn't wearing the red and yellow, and he was still the NWO version here. In fact, sometimes people think that he was. Their Mandela affect their brains. I mean, not even the most anti-WWF/WWE main event fan could hate on this, because you cannot get over how it makes you feel. Once again, that's the whole point of wrestling. I mean, even the crowd were larger than life on this night, as were the two superstars. And if you do want to talk about matches you could show to people that don't get sports entertainment, well, you should probably put this on, and I think at the very least, they would start to understand. It's so damn good that even today when you do watch it, it gives you the same kind of goosebumps. And that says a lot, man, because a hell of a lot has happened. Number 14, Mr. Perfect vs. Bret Hart at SummerSlam 1991. So I remember the first time I saw Mr. Perfect vs. Bret Hart at SummerSlam 1991, and I was so damn young I didn't really know what was going on. Then I did get old when I learnt more about the art of pro wrestling when I realised, oh my gosh, that's one of the best wrestling matches anybody could hope to see. It also stood out like a sore thumb on that pay-per-view, which proved the times were a-changing, because you also get Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior versus Sergeant Slaughter, General Adnan, and Colonel Mustafa. Now, I won't talk about that here, but just go and learn about the build and what went down in this match. It was utterly ridiculous. Now, SummerSlam 91 also has Ted DiBiase's versus Virgil, which is a barrel of laughs, but nothing, and I mean nothing, comes close to Hart versus Mr. Perfect that stole the match of the night honors. I mean, man, it was probably the match of the year. Nothing else was going to come close because they were such workhorses, and it is 18 minutes of pure wrestling skill, and some spots that make you scratch your head as you ponder to yourself, well, how the flub did they do that? Bret also wins the wonderful Intercontinental title at the end of this. Just feels so damn special. It will absolutely blow your brain as well to learn that Mr. Perfect was injured during this, and he basically didn't have a back, and he still works better than most people in the industry at the time. That dude didn't make any sense. They do it again at the King of the Ring 1993 when Perfect's back was also destroyed, but these two arguably had the best chemistry of any two wrestlers in the history of the world. I mean, some of it is hyperbole, but go and watch this today and try and find fault with it. You won't be able to because every little thing makes sense. It is not 2 + 2 = potato. You still hear wrestlers today talk about this match as something they try and go back to today to see if they can live up to expectations. I mean, it really is the perfect show of guts and respect, and it went a long way to make Bret Hart, who of course would go on to become the WWF champion, and that is what Mr. Perfect wanted to do as well. That Kurt Hennig man, what an absolute goat. Number 13, Bret Hart versus the British Bulldog for SummerSlam 1992. So you do need to get into the nitty-gritty with this one because it is absolutely nuts. I mean, to begin with, Wembley Stadium does welcome essentially 80,000 fans during a period where the WWF was down in the USA. So of course it headlines with Bret Hart versus the British Bulldog for the Intercontinental Champion. Davey Boy Smith was the homegrown hero. We gotta put him over and sell some pay-per-views. The disaster that we would learn about years later, especially from Bret Hart's book, is that maybe, just maybe during that weekend, the British Bulldog had gone on a drug-fueled bender and totally forgotten the match. This was not good because it was mapped out for 25 minutes. It meant that Bret all of a sudden had to go into ring general mode, meaning he walked Davey Boy Smith through this, move by move, beat by beat, whisper to whisper. Even though I've told you that though, go and watch this match, you won't be able to tell because that's how tight and how good they both were. I mean, even if the British Bulldog was totally out of it, his natural ability carried him through, and when he does score the 1-2-3, that Wembley crowd goes ballistic. They didn't feel like they'd been shortchanged, they felt like they'd just seen a classic. Even though Bret Hart lost on this evening, he still says it's one of his finest moments, because he didn't even realise he would be able to take somebody in Davey Boy's condition and ensure they went through all the way to the finish without even a beat. It's frankly astonishing that this headliner turned out to be one of the greatest WW matches of all time, because as he was walking to the ring, I assume that Hart must have feared the worst. So really it's a victory for professionalism then, or somebody being born just to be a pro wrestler. So listen, if you do have 20 minutes today, just sit down with all of this in your head. It will totally blow your socks off. Then put them back on because you don't want to catch cold. Number 12, Kurt Angle vs. Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 21. So the big worry, of course, when Kurt Angle vs. Shawn Michaels finally went down is how the flub are they going to meet expectations? Well, it helps when you're two of the best wrestlers of all time, and they took that bat, and my gosh, they hit a home run. End of story. The reason this was so damn good as well is because the build had been tremendous. I mean, not only was it one of the few times where WWE had kept two separate stars on Raw and SmackDown, so the coming together felt like a big deal, but Kurt Angle was so desperate to beat Shawn, well, he basically mimicked him, and he brought back Marty Jannetty, he brought back Sherry Martel. This stuff was laugh out loud funny, and then you get one of the best WWE matches of all time. The start of all of this is awesome as well because Shawn Michaels actually out-wrestles the Olympic gold medalist, which is when Angle goes, all right, well, I'm going to beat you up as a fight, and he's got Michael's number. That's when the Heartbreak Kid goes into cell mode, and once again, as we've talked about time and time again in this list, he's just a masterclass, man. He knows how to make you think he's in peril. Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler on commentary also deserve their plaudits as well, because by the time Kurt locks in the ankle lock on Michaels, they are shouting it will be humbling if the Heartbreak Kid does have to tap out, and then he does. Post-match is funny too. Kurt Angle looks like he's won $1 million. He's just so satisfied that he just got the biggest victory of his career. Of course, it would then go nuts because a year later he would be in TNA. Different video for a different day. What I would love to know is how much of this match was called in the ring, because nothing looks rehearsed and nothing looked forced. It just looked like two people coming together and realized, man, we should teach science because we have some of the best chemistry ever. It really does go off without a hitch, and actually left some fans going, that was better than I expected. And believe you me, the bar was so damn high, you could actually put this in the top 10 if you wanted, and I would totally understand it. Number 11, Razor Ramon vs. Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 10. There is an old saying in wrestling, and maybe life, there's more drama behind the curtain than there is in front of it. I mean, that's not strictly true, but there was certainly an equal measure of the stuff heading into WrestleMania 10 at Madison Square Garden. Shawn Michaels had decided to literally take the Intercontinental title home with him following a suspension, and that forced the WWF to craft a new belt, and they gave it to Razor Ramon. Once the Heartbreak Kid returned, they turned this all into a storyline, with Shawn claiming, I am the real IC champion. That's how they justified the ladder gimmick as well at WrestleMania. Well, we'll just hang both titles from the ceiling, and whichever one grabs it, you can be considered the real champ. It was also the very first ladder match on a WWF pay-per-view, so it felt like a massive deal, and apparently annoyed Bret Hart. He had come up with this idea, and then got ignored. Once again, go and read his book. According to both Shawn and Razor as well, they only had one prop ladder to work with on this evening, so they didn't want to break it, but they did absolutely wreck each other with it. And really, it's another great example of how you can use a big steel thing as some extra firepower, while also using it to do some crazy bumps. I mean, who hasn't seen Shawn Michaels climbing to the top of the thing and doing that big splash? I understand by today's standards it's a little bit lame, but not when you go back to WrestleMania 10, it felt like the biggest thing you'd ever seen in your life. If he doesn't do that as well, you do not get some of the other TLC matches we talked about today. This was properly opening the door, and it just feels like an absolute demolition derby, and a historic reminder that sometimes the simple way is the best way. Deserves to be lauded for the sheer amount of creativity and daring on display. So let's just sum it up in a sentence. In 1994, fans hadn't seen anything like this, and from this point on, that would never be the same again. I'm going to check out now, maybe to go watch this match. Pollard, tagging you in.
Cheers for that, Miller. Right, let's get into the juicy top 10, starting with number 10, John Cena vs. CM Punk, Money in the Bank 2011. There was so much riding on the main event here, putting welterweight rebel CM Punk against staunch company man John Cena. In storyline, Vince McMahon had warned Cena he'd be fired if he lost the WWE title to somebody who'd vowed to leave the company with it. Then there was the threat of Punk losing his edge amidst more Super Cena shenanigans. At Money in the Bank, WWE came through on the first chapter of their Summer of Punk, having Punker win the belt, blow McMahon a kiss, and dash through the crowd, back to his house where he popped the WWE title in his refrigerator. There was searing heat on McMahon and John Laurinaitis when the former told the latter to ring the bell during a Cena STF spot. This Montreal screwjob nod ended when an incensed Cena attacked Laurinaitis so that the match could continue, though that did prove costly for Big Match John. Punk nailed Cena with the GTS, pinning him for the win, then managed to outsmart Money in the Bank briefcase holder Alberto Del Rio as CM Punk fled the arena while the Chicago crowd erupted. The build-up, the hot live crowd, the rebellion of Punk, the sometimes uneasy corporate vibes of Cena, and the end result, everything about this was perfect from first bell to the last. Even if it wouldn't take long for WWE to drop the ball on the whole Summer of Punk stuff. Yeah, not great. Number 9, CM Punk vs. Drew McIntyre, Bad Blood 2024. Few matches held inside the fearsome structure felt worthy once WWE turned Hell in a Cell into a yearly pay-per-view back in 2009. It became common practice for the creative team to suddenly realise, yikes, October's here, time to force some unworthy, undeserving feuds into the cell, right? Deserved gimmick match treatment is partly why Drew McIntyre vs. CM Punk from the aptly named Bad Blood is here at all. They had a rivalry worthy of Hell in a Cell, but that was only half the battle. Come crunch time, Drew and Punk produced arguably the finest Hell in a Cell match ever. It had everything: blood, storytelling, flourishes, like using bracelet beads instead of thumbtacks, and if that sounds lame in isolation, it sure didn't within the context of the wider narrative. There was tension, and there was the sense that both men were fighting for their lives to survive. The last bit is key, as these dudes weren't going through the motions in Atlanta. Far from it, they didn't waste a second of the 31 minutes handed to them, and there was next to no padding for the sake of it here. Like the best blow-off matches, this Cell encounter encounter rewarded those who were emotionally invested in this blood feud. Granted, it won't go down in history as the most famous Hell in a Cell match ever, you know what will, but McIntyre vs Punk should be held in high esteem as an example of the iconic structure done right, done properly. Number 8. Edge and Christian versus the Dudley Boys versus the Hardy Boys, WrestleMania 17. The WWF should have run a warning before TLC 2 that read 9 tables were harmed in the making of this match. That's how many of those tables wrestlers thundered through in Houston on that night. Man, putting the match together must have surely been a head scratcher for Edge and Christian, the Hardys and the Dudley Boys. After all, they'd already whipped everybody into a frenzy at SummerSlam 2000 with the first TLC, not to mention the Edge and Christian and Hardys ladder match at No Mercy 1999, or the Hardys and Dudleys table match at the 2000 Royal Rumble. How could they possibly top all of that? Well, by getting even more extreme, that's how. This time, Lita wasn't the only one who interfered to help her team, as Spike Dudley was on hand to aid Bubba and Devon. A Rhino made his WWE pay-per-view debut to ride to the rescue of Edge and Christian. Of course, the match's undoubted highlight reel moment came when Jeff Hardy was left dangling from the titles high above the ring yet again. This time, rather than hitting him with ladders to make him fall, Edge performed a stunning spear that was, mega risky. Seriously, it's up for debate who had the worst bump here, Jeff landing on his back or neck, or Edge plunging face first towards the mat, though both men likely considered their rough landings worth it, as that spot became an iconic replay that WWE would use hundreds of times after Mania 17. The finish, which saw Christian mount Rhino's shoulders to pull down the belts, was creative and inspired too. All 6 men in the match, plus the other 3 wrestlers who got involved, they all delivered big, somehow even topping SummerSlam 2000. If you want peak TLC match chaos, then this one, that should be your first stop. Number 7. Mankind vs The Undertaker, King of the Ring 1998. You know I said earlier about CM Punk vs Drew McIntyre being arguably the greatest ever Hell in a Cell match? Well, the term arguably was there due to what happened at King of the Ring in 1998. Granted, The Undertaker vs Mankind almost came across as more of an extended angle than an actual match, but the impact it's made on wrestling is undeniably huge. Not only that, but 2 terrifying bumps in particular will stay with Mick Foley forever. The Micker has regularly talked about how he still feels those bumps every single day, and looking back, the hardcore legend is genuinely lucky to still be alive. Foley's jaw-dropping falls off and through the Hell in a Cell structure scared the living daylights out of everybody watching. At one point, Undertaker even looked down on a prone Mankind and wondered, is that guy actually dead? Which says it all. Good old Terry Funk was also on hand to get literally chokeslammed out of his trainers to buy some time for Foley to somewhat recuperate. But it's just incredible that Mick was able to keep going, especially when we later learned that he can't remember most of what happened after that second bump, including bringing thumbtacks into play. When people talk about cultural impact that extends far beyond the limits of the wrestling business, they're talking about things like Undertaker vs Mankind, and this legendary Hell in a Cell match. Number 6. Hulk Hogan vs The Ultimate Warrior, WrestleMania 6. It's fair to say, the Ultimate Warrior didn't exactly dedicate himself to learning the nuances of professional wrestling. As the late great Bobby Heenan once said, it's like Warrior came out of a Gold's Gym, had a can of tuna, a raw egg, saw a WWF truck go by and decided, yep, I'm a wrestler now. Still, for what Vince McMahon was looking for back then in the 80s, the Ultimate Warrior was perfect. A jacked up shredded physique, shouty, largely incoherent promos, and a couple of power moves to get the job done. That was about it. Some might say that Hulk Hogan was the same, but to be fair to Hogan, he had a genuine love for the business, worked plenty of fun matches, and was capable in-ring wise of a lot more than he often showed in the Fed. And at WrestleMania 6, that was one of Hogan's finest hours, though he wasn't even the main focal point this time. With the Ultimate Challenge having so much hype for both men in this gargantuan babyface versus babyface match, the contest could have easily tanked, but Hogan and Warrior put together an at times simple match, but one that brilliantly played to the strengths of both men, and boy did the Rogers Centre crowd in Toronto absolutely eat it up. This one had everything. There was star power, marquee value, a passing of the torch moment, there were stalemates, and a crowd so lively they practically needed Mania payoffs themselves. Don't let anybody tell you that Hogan vs. Warrior flopped. I mean, sure, it didn't pull as many buy rates as WrestleMania 5 or Hulk Hogan vs. Randy Savage, but Mania 6 became one of the most talked about matches ever for a reason. McMahon's vision for what the WWF could well be was distilled into cartoonish perfection on that night in Toronto. There was something magical about it back then, and there still is in many ways when reliving the Ultimate Challenge today. A clever subplot involving Hogan tweaking his knee added to the occasion too, masterfully selling the idea that he was a beaten up old warhorse about to be put out to pasture by the young stallion who would carry the promotion forward. Some matches are immortal, and regardless of your thoughts on either man, this is certainly one of them. Number 5. Triple H vs. Cactus Jack, Royal Rumble 2000. For all of the hellish bumps he took over the decades, Mick Foley should first and foremost be remembered as an absolute master psychologist, knowing the perfect time to lace his matches with sympathetic moments designed to get fans rallying behind him. As a prime example of that, take this street fight, a brutal battle pitting Foley, the deranged Cactus Jack to be specific, up against the easy to hate top heel of the day, Triple H. The game was the corporate choice. Foley, the man of the people. Mick was just like me and you. He travelled to Madison Square Garden as a fan, and now he was trying to become the WWF champion in that one and the same iconic venue. The energy was here long before any punches were thrown, the crowd instantly into it, and Foley and Trips went on to produce an adventurous brawl that featured some of Mick's wildest ideas, including that knees first bump over the ring steps, the sickening thumbtacks landing, and Foley, of course, bringing his old barbed wire 2x4 out to play, and the MSG crowd loved every single second. As usual for the time, JR and Jerry Lawler laid down one heck of a soundtrack for what became known as one of the greatest title fights ever, perfectly putting over how sympathetic Mick Foley was and just how cruel Triple H was willing to be. Their Hell in a Cell encounter at No Way Out the next month was fabulous, but the Rumble Street fight, that should be your first stop for anything involving Mick Foley and Triple H. Number 4, Bret Hart vs. Owen Hart, WrestleMania 10. The greatest opening match in WrestleMania history? Absolutely. It's a little nuts to think that Bruce Hart pitched himself for this spot, the Hart brother who would wind up feuding with Bret, but thankfully the Hitman had enough sway by this point in time to convince Vince McMahon that, nah, how about we go with Owen for this one, yeah? Safe to say, the only person gutted about that decision was Bruce Hart, for Bret and Owen delivered magic whenever they were in the ring, and WrestleMania 10 was a prime example of that, a technical classic with some needle between the siblings. It was such a simple story too, little brother being jealous of big brother, even though big brother is doing everything they can to look out for him. The story was the glue holding everything together, and then it was just down to the talent to take over. Also, part of how we got here was that Bret was set to face the winner of Lex Luger and Yokozuna later that night in the Mania main event. So, to make it fair, Bret would also have to wrestle twice, the first match being against Owen, and what a match it was. Owen focused on Bret's already injured leg, which made perfect sense, and the sudden finish of Owen sitting down from Bret's attempted victory roll, a move, the very same move that Bret had used to win the previous year's King of the Ring, it made Owen look like a genius, outsmarting his big brother, which also gave Owen an automatic in to be at the front of the line when Bret won the WWF title from Yokozuna later that night, brilliantly setting up for further fantastic matches between the Hart Boys throughout the rest of 1994. Just absolute magic. Number 3, The Rock vs. Steve Austin, WrestleMania 17. While some consider Bret vs. Owen to be the greatest WrestleMania opener ever, to many, WrestleMania 17 is the best WrestleMania, period. There's TLC 2, Vince vs. Shane, a fun scrap between Undertaker and Triple H, a frantic technical war between Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit, and hey, the gimmick battle royal was a whole lot of brilliant. For the main event, we had a Steve Austin desperate to get the WWF title back as he went up against the Great One. Of course, none of us would fully realize at the time just how desperate Stone Cold was, making a deal with the devil as he turned heel by joining forces with Vince McMahon to get the job done. A heel turn that still splits opinion all these years later. As for the match itself, it's viewed as one of those responsible for popularizing the kick out of a whole bunch of big finishing moves. Safe to say, this one had a whole lot of near falls. Whether you like that formula or not, it's hard to deny that Rock and Austin had us all on the edge of our seats, getting their shoulders up at the very last minute from rock bottoms and stone cold stunners, all as you could feel Austin's growing desperation with each moment. The Texas Rattlesnake distraught as Rock continued to kick out of everything. The atmosphere was nuts, two top stars at the peak of their powers, two of the greatest rivals in company history. Rock and Austin, they had plenty of great matches over the years, but nothing was ever better than WrestleMania 17, acting as a perfect swan song of sorts for the Attitude Era, with ruthless aggression lurking just around the corner. Number 2, Shawn Michaels vs. The Undertaker, WrestleMania 25. Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker made WrestleMania magic together not once but twice, and in back-to-back years no less. While it's tough to choose between those matches, it's the first one, the 2009 one, that just about edges it out here, where the two icons rolled into Houston with a giant chip on their shoulders, as they both admitted in the years since, feeling disrespected at how WWE positioned the match. Sure, it ended up going on third to last, but WWE actually originally wanted the match to go on even earlier than that, something that was viewed as an insult that served as further motivation for Shawn and Taker to show what they could do. Being two of the greatest wrestling minds of all time, they put their heads together and decided that, nah, we're just going to make it impossible for anybody to follow what we're about to do. That would be John Cena vs Edge vs Big Show, and the infamously boring main event of Triple H vs Randy Orton. The way that The Undertaker plucked HBK out of midair when Shawn attempted a moonsault, then hit him with the tombstone, it was a thing of beauty, coming after a full 30 minutes of gripping back and forth action. Number 1, Bret Hart vs Steve Austin, WrestleMania 13. Bret Hart vs Steve Austin at Survivor Series 1996 was fantastic, but that was simply a test run, a taster for what the two would do at WrestleMania 13. Hart and Austin had ridiculous chemistry as two polar opposite characters who were so like-minded as in-ring workers, sharing so much in common when they stepped between the ropes. Austin would later admit to being a little hesitant about the match, once that he found out it was a submission match. After all, he'd not really used any submission holds since binning off Ted DiBiase's $1 Million Dream. Still, that proved not to be a problem, and adding further to the attraction of this bout, it was incoming UFC badass Ken Shamrock as a special referee, the special enforcer. I mean, nobody was gonna mess with the world's most dangerous man, not even Bret Hart and Stone Cold Steve Austin. And the greatest compliment you can give to this match, to Bret and to Austin, is that they orchestrated a double turn as if this was something that happened on TV every single week. That's how easy they made it all look. By this point, fans had started to get behind Austin's anti-hero persona, and Bret didn't like the changing face of the WWF audience. Mid-match, there's a definite swing towards Steve Austin becoming the top babyface, while Bret Hart, he was becoming the weary, frustrated veteran heel. That closing shot of blood trickling down Austin's face as he passed out in a sharpshooter, that cemented Stone Cold's popularity, his new role going forward, and that became one of the most iconic shots and sequences in pro wrestling history. Of course, the Hitman continued to attack Austin after the bell, confirming his heel status, all as the Chicago crowd rained down boos on Hart, then gave Austin a huge ovation and chanted his name as he made his way to the back. WWE has never been better, 22 minutes of in-ring perfection, and so much more.